To the November 4th, 2019 meeting of the Merrimack School Board. If you could please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. Before item number 2, public participation. Sorry about that. I'm usually better at this. Sorry. So item number 2 is public participation. Anyone that would like to speak, please come to the microphone and state your name and address for the record. And again, you probably didn't get this either at home, but Vice Chair Guglielmi is excused from tonight's meeting. I feel like there might be someone, so I'm just going to give it another second.
Yeah. Sue Ellen O'Brien, 26 Jessica Drive here in town. Would you like me to address the?
Yes.
I'm here to listen to what is being said about the parking issues, specifically at Merrimack High School. I have some concerns in regards to some safety issues that are going on in regards to that parking there. Specifically, well, I have some concerns about the lottery and people that are being put into the lottery and the lottery process. The number of spots that are being allotted, there appears, not only this year, but in at least the last 5 or 6 years, there is a variety of empty spots at MHS every day. I know that I have been in contact with Cinda, and I also have been in contact with Principal Putney in regards to some of my concerns. My safety issues in regards to specifically the dirt lot are that there are a number of students that are parking there rather haphazardly. There is lots of rocks in that parking lot. There are hills that are being kind of maneuvered around. I know that there are a variety of children that are walking, oftentimes at dark, in tandem down that road in all kinds of weather conditions. There was an accident there last week with somebody trying to get in that had been blocked out. I know Merrimack Police had responded there. There are no sidewalks for the kids who are coming from basically up where the tennis courts were, all the way down to the first empty lot. I have recently reached out, I believe on October 21st, to Principal Putney in regards to seeing if we could get at least the last 25 juniors or so who had applied for permits in, I think, August. I believe that's the only ones back from August that were not covered. If we could potentially get them under a new parking permit and maybe have them fill in some of the empty spots, and coming up with some solutions as to what we can do in regards to that. I know that there has also been some issues in regards to Hadley Road, which is coming down McElwain. It is that horseshoe-shaped road. Kids are also parking there. Somebody today had commented on the high school forum that if an ambulance tried to get down that road at this point in time that they could not. So I'm just here to see what the plan is in regards to addressing some of these.
Thank you, Mrs. O'Brien.
Hi, I'm Barry Wandell. I'm also here for the safety issues involved with the high school parking. Hopefully we can address some of those tonight. I share Sue Ellen's. I'm also from here in town, 73 Bean Road. And I've also, we had a particular situation with our daughter that created a safety issue in particular. The dirt lot is in question as to who has jurisdiction. Kids are sent out there even though it's not a part of the school property, so that created the issue that I had. Also, it didn't seem to be a firm policy/procedure in place for it. So I'm just here to hear what goes on and to hopefully hear some resolutions to some things. So.
Thank you, Mr. Wandell. I see no other public participation. We will close public participation. We will go into item number 3, which is supports for students with disabilities at Merrimack High School, specifically section 504. And I invite to the table Principal Sharon Putney and Christina Connor. Thank you for coming.
it's funny, I always get asked like what 504 is. Perfect. Okay.
So, good evening. I have the pleasure of introducing the 504 coordinator at Merrimack High School, Christina Connor. Christina has been working with youth and their families in Greater Nashua since 1993. She worked at the Nashua Children's Home from 1993 to 1996 as a residential counselor and later as a supervisor. Prior to that, Christina worked at Community Council from 1996 to 1998 as a case manager in the Children's Department. She was employed with the Youth Council from 1998 to 2019 as the Director of Programs. At the Youth Council, she was the overseer of all the agency programs, ran the substance abuse prevention program and parenting classes, and compiled agency statistics for grant funders. Christina Connor holds certifications as a certified prevention specialist and as a certified recovery support worker. She has been the 504 coordinator at Merrimack High School since November of 2013, starting out with 2 days a week, and then for this year, the 2019-20 school year, her time has now increased to 5 days a week. Christina has a wealth of experience, which makes her an invaluable resource at Merrimack High School. She's approachable for students, parents, and staff, and works collaboratively to support students. I have appreciated her contributions also on the student support team and helping to provide guidance and insight in wrapping around students. Having Christina Connor in the building full-time this year is making an incredible difference. Just last week, I met with a parent who was concerned about her child. I was able to meet with the parent, ask her to wait, and walked upstairs to Christina's office, where we were able to pull in the school counselor, and they immediately met with the parent to address her needs and concerns. This would not have been possible last year, and sometimes situations require immediate attention and Christina Connor's expertise. I want to thank the board for having us here tonight to present about Section 504, and thank Christina for presenting this important information.
Thank you. Like I was saying, a lot of people ask what 504 is. I've had actually some people come up to me and say, isn't that a retirement plan? And I said, no, it's not a 403B. But it does help students with disabilities with their future, I think. It gives them a chance to know, to give them confidence, to give them a sense of there's a team surrounding them, helping them. It came about, it's civil rights legislation that came about is an anti-discrimination statute back in 1993 with the Rehabilitation Act, and again, more regulations were put in place in 2008 with the American Disabilities Act. And it helps us to provide education, access to education for students with disabilities as adequately as we provide it with students without disabilities. And for students, in order to qualify for a 504, students have to have a physical or mental disability. They have to have, it's either documented usually from a doctor's note saying that they have the disability, or from a therapist or some kind of assessment in the community. That's the first part, is to say that they have a disability. The second part is the biggest part is does it substantially limit one or more life activities? So life activities could be breathing, could be lifting, bending, could be things as concentration, learning, those kind of things. You have to say that, first of all, they have a disability, and then it impacts a life activity. So some things like, we all know the bee allergies, peanut allergies, those are things. But also scoliosis. They have to be able to, sometimes they won't be able to participate in PE like every other student, but they can't say they can't do PE. They just work with the teacher about what kind of accommodations may be put in place to help them out. It could be things like, we see more and more the concussions that are having, especially multiple concussions, long-term effects. So things like doing a PowerPoint presentation could be something they can't have screen time. They can't be exposed to that. It causes more pain. So putting things in place, they do a poster board or something else, kind of accommodation, say, well, how can we address their needs in a different way? What Section 504 is not. It's not special education. I say that to every student who comes in, we talk to the parents. It doesn't modify their curriculum. It doesn't provide, it doesn't limit their ability to get education like everybody else does. It's not specialized education. And it doesn't, it's not in a place to boost the students' GPA or to get accommodations on their SATs. It doesn't give them special privileges like parking passes or to, ability to leave campus during study halls, to go down to Buckley's, or to roam the halls. It's not for that. And it's not for students who don't have an impairment that substantially limits life activity. We all have anxiety. I say it all the time. If you don't have anxiety when it comes to midterms and finals, then I'd be worried. But it's a matter of how is it impacting you? Does it have a significant impact in your life in some way, shape, or form? So my role as 504 coordinator has grown over the years because I started out, like Sharon said, with 2 days a week, and I've moved up to 5 days a week. But I facilitate all the 504 meetings. I schedule them. I talk to all the parents. I figure out with the team when we can meet. I distribute all the plans. I write them up, make sure they get out to all the parents, all the teachers, and communicate with the team, which is the biggest piece, I think, is to make sure that the accommodations are in place for the student, and the whole team understands what the accommodations are, and is aware of them, and complies with them. So we might, in every single meeting, we might not have the ability to have every teacher at every single meeting. So you got to make sure if the teacher doesn't quite understand what the accommodation is, that they can ask questions about it, or if the parents or the student doesn't. I attend all the transition meetings for the 8th grade coming up, because I think that's huge. The difference between the middle school and the high school can be really big, to make sure that the parents, first of all, and the students know that there is going to be somebody in the high school that's going to be there for them, and to help them to realize that what's the most appropriate accommodations at the high school that is different from the middle school. So we develop plans. I work with Becky Thompson to develop plans for the students coming up to the high school. And I maintain all the stats for 504. And when I got here in 2013, there were no stats. So I had to kind of go through with all of them, and it's actually some of the ones I'm going to show you tonight are things that, some of them really eye-opening to show that some of the different stats that we have. So some of the trends. Back in 2014-15, actually we had the same numbers we have now. We have 179 504 students. And the difference, you can see that it started out with 179 and it went down for a couple of years, and now it's going back up. And I don't think the difference is that, obviously we have the same amount of students, but what happened is that every year we have some graduating students. And those students, the new ones coming in was less than the ones graduating going out. So that kind of is a downward trend. Now we're seeing that we're still having graduating seniors, but there's more and more coming up from the younger grades. There's more, we're going to talk a little bit more about that later, but either because we're recognizing them more, or we're seeing that there's a problem, we're noticing it, things that we wouldn't even notice before, so that we're like, you know what, this student can benefit from a 504 plan. But the numbers are definitely growing. We're almost the same as special ed, and it's only me. So there's no case managers or anything involved. It's not the same, for the paperwork is so much better, but there's still a lot of students that need help and support. The reasons for referral, if you compare 2015 to 2019, you're going to see that students have ADHD. They've had ADHD back then, but the number hasn't really changed with that. For the medical, it's actually gone down a little bit, except for when you're talking about concussions and migraines. We're seeing a rise in those. But what you see the biggest percent, the 30% increase in mental health referrals. We're getting them more and more and more. The anxiety, the depression is becoming overwhelming for some of these students. They're not attending school. They don't know how to cope with their anxiety. They can't concentrate when they're in class. We're seeing that a lot more. For the new referrals for the 2018-2019, there was 42 new referrals to 504. 24% were for medical diagnoses. That could be anything from health conditions, diabetes, arthritis, concussions and migraines, and then 28% for ADHD diagnosis, but 48%, higher than both of those, is a mental health diagnosis. Those are referrals coming in, and that's been a trend over the years that we're getting more and more of the mental health diagnoses. This one I thought was an interesting slide too, because if you do the breakdown currently, we have 179 students. We have 105 males, and 54% of them have ADHD. And then you can see the medical conditions, only 13% reported have the mental health concerns. Doesn't mean they don't have mental health concerns. It just means that maybe the ADHD concerns are much bigger and they're more known for that. Whereas the females, you have the opposite. You have only 10% are coming in with ADHD diagnosis and 47% with mental health diagnosis. And you also see the medical conditions. For the females, I'm getting a lot more students with migraines than ever before. And how we're responding to the mental health referrals, I think the mental health initiatives in the elementary school has been amazing because we're starting young. We're starting when they're first starting to see these students struggling with some of this mental health stuff. And putting things in place. I mean, I'm grateful we're starting that. I think it's going to take a while to get up to the high school. But that's why we have the transition efforts between the schools. Becky Thompson will go down to JMU's and meet with the 6th graders coming up. I meet with the 8th graders coming up to the high school so that we can kind of be consistent throughout the years. The increase in hours has been very helpful. To be able to meet, like you said, with some of the students that come in, or to talk to the counselors like the nurse. I work well with the nurse, with all the counselors, with the teachers. As they're seeing things, I'm there to respond where I wasn't in the past. And we have to have good partnerships as a team. We're a team effort throughout across the school because these students need to know that we're all there to support them. And I think the biggest concern is we have so many students that have this anxiety that just don't know how to cope with situations. So kind of putting things in place to be able to help them work with more of the parents to get them the coping skills to not only fix the problems that the students are seeing, but to teach them how to problem solve, teach them how to be able to cope with everyday life so that it doesn't get to the point where it's impacting their education. Thank you.
Are there any questions about 504 at Merrimack High School? I definitely had one, and that is that I know that in your introduction, you were talking a lot about some of the background you had that brought you to us. And knowing what we're doing with social emotional learning, what skill sets do you see have you been able to bring to some of the engagements with our students that may be consistent with what we're trying to do in those younger grades based on what you've done in your background?
And I think building the relationships with the parents, with the students, I've been doing that for so many years, so that they feel that support person in place. They have to have a connection to the school. And it's not just me, but with the counselors and everybody, with a teacher, anything. It helps them to come to school, helps them feel safe in school, and it helps them to let us know what's going on with their lives. You may see a student falling asleep in class, but you don't know why they're falling asleep in class. It's because they're up watching their younger siblings or they're taking care of that. There's all kinds of things that are going on in their lives that we don't know. So I think my background is to be able to be that support person for them or to help them get the resources. I've worked in Greater Nashua for 26 years. I know a lot of resources in town that they've been, like how to get hooked up with therapists. It's impossible to get a therapist, right? So to be able to kind of say, like, have you tried this route? Or I call up friends I know that are therapists and help connect with them. So there's a lot of different resources out there that I think and I want to be part of the mental health committee. We've talked about that, to be able to share some of the knowledge that I've had over the years.
That's fantastic. And thank you for being willing to participate with that. Naomi?
Thank you for everything you do. I was just curious what the biggest difference is your sense of your day with the increased time. I know that you spoke a little bit about being available, and of course it's simply more time to do basic tasks, but what's the biggest sense of difference that you have in the position?
I think the fact that I'm able to do the follow-up with the students, because right now in the past I would have the meeting, create the plan, and say, not good luck, but basically, right, it was like, okay, the counselor, I'm here if you need me. But then some of those students, especially one with the mental health, they're not going to come back unless they know that you're really there and really supporting them. Or they're in their meeting going, I'm overwhelmed and I don't really know how this is going to help me. So now I can follow up with those students and be able to check in on them and say, like, how are things going? Do we need to revisit some of the things on the plan, or do we need to put other things in place for them? I feel that's my biggest, that I've been able to do this year, that I haven't been able to do in the past.
And I guess my other question, I want to open up as well. What, and maybe more towards Sharon, based on what you've seen in the first couple of years at Merrimack High School, you know, what do you see as like the long-term strategy for 504? I know it's been probably something that was, you know, how are the 504 results expected to work now that we would have someone in the position for 5 days a week? Because it sounds like that's been a void, and maybe we were not providing the resources necessary until now. And, you know, so where do you see student outcomes being impacted by that? Because obviously at the end of the day, student outcomes are how, you know, we're measured. And you came to our board meeting, I think, 4 weeks ago to talk about graduation rates, and how do you see some of the work that's going into a more concentrated 504 effort in the school going to impact some of those initiatives that you're having right now?
Yeah, I just think the more we can try to figure out how to meet the needs of all of our students, the better off those students are going to be with not only academic supports, but also mental health supports, guidance supports. You know, I reference the student support meeting because that's really a place where we talk about students who are at risk, either academically or attendance, or just are struggling with other issues that could be medical, or you know, they can be students with 504s. I think the fact that Christina's part of that, the nurse is part of that. We have the school psychologist, we have administration, we have transition coordinator. We have a lot of us there to kind of take a look. Everyone is a different resource, and they have different expertise that they bring to the table. So I think that that's really helping to meet the needs and wrap around those students so that they stay in school, have a positive experience, and are able to graduate and become, you know, citizens of the community that are contributing. And this makes a huge difference.
And I want to be proactive, absolutely. I want to catch the kids young. I want to catch them early enough so that they're not dropping out, you know, making a difference so they can stay in school and feel supported.
And the other thing I think you were hitting on is, you know, medical. Well, those come and go. And I think, you know, for 504s, a lot of parents don't understand what they're for, if they're permanent, if they're temporary. Mm-hmm. And can you give a little bit of context around what a 504 is and how what a parent would just, you know, be able to figure out whether that might be a fit for their child? You know, because I think a lot of parents, they look at, again, you got hit it earlier, 504s are IEPs, and that they are the same thing as special education, where it could be a temporary accommodation. And so, you know, I think a lot of parents may not look at what resources may come from a 504 because their child may be experiencing something medical that will pass. You know, like a concussion comes and the concussion goes. So can you get a little bit into that? Because I think I asked you about 3 questions in one. Right. But, you know, how it's defined and how parents can find out the best way to advocate for their child to see if that might be something that will help them stay on course in school.
And I think that's what we do is we find out, like, if there's some concern, medical, mental health, whatever it is, they come and they meet. We have the meeting. If there's a concern, we can either do a pre-meeting, just kind of like talk about it, which is what we did actually this morning with the parent she was talking about. We talked with her, we talked with the student, and then we're going to get to the point where we're going to probably have the documentation necessary to have an actual official 504 meeting. But that's having the conversations with those parents, the concerns. That's why I'm here 5 days a week. I can actually have those conversations. What's the best route to take? And yeah, if there's a concussion, especially if there's multiple concussions and they're having longer term symptoms, we need to meet and figure out. And it could be something that it is in place for 6 months and then it doesn't need to happen longer than that. For students with ADHD, they come in freshman year, it's brand new school, they're thinking, but by the time they get to their junior year, they've had these things in place, they've built these skills that they don't need it anymore, possibly. But it's having the conversations about where their son or daughter is at, what their concerns are, and then taking the next steps as needed.
Excellent. Are there any questions other than that? I feel like I've hogged it. But the one thing I think that might be helpful, and again, we always sort of to the left side of the table on this, is if there are resources that you feel would be beneficial for us to have on our website about what a 504 is, how to decide if a 504 is right for your child. Those are things that might help as far as to frame out, again, because when we look at student outcomes, if there is a resource that maybe a parent or a family didn't identify as the right solution for their child, whether it be short-term or long-term, then that might be something,
That's true.
to help them greatly. So, because again, a lot of them just look at it as a different form of IEP, and that,
Oh,
of course, can be no further from the truth.
Mhm.
So thank you. Andy?
I'd just like to say something. So I've had a child that's had an IEP all the way through school, and also one that had a 504. And one of the things and tell me if this is still true or not, the avenue to pursue whether a 504 is appropriate is a decision that ends up being jointly made between the parent, the school, as well as any medical professional that gets involved, whether it's a therapist or whatever. It's not as though you can wake up one morning and say, I want my child to have a 504. There
Yes.
is a process to go through to do that.
It is, yes.
And is there still, in the case of if there needs to be a therapeutic evaluation, is there still funding to support those kind of activities, or is that still at the expense of the individual child's insurance? Because I know at the time, and we're talking 15 years ago, that long? I don't remember. It was a while. There was actually funding that was available to pay for therapists to actually run an evaluation. I don't know if that's still a scenario that the 504s do or not.
And I think by the time that most of the ones when they come to us, they are already in counseling, right? And they're working with their doctor on something. So I rarely get somebody that comes, and so far, but maybe as we're getting out there, we're learning more. But I don't know of any necessary funding available, but we help kind of things. I can help them figure out what the connection is if they have to get,
Right.
to go to a therapist.
Because back then, a long time ago, 504s were not really understood at all.
Yeah.
And it was through a conversation with guidance at the time, and it was actually the head of guidance at the time. The opportunity of a 504 evaluation came up. It was something we never considered. There was nothing in place, and it was a process that we started because of the conversation. So I wanted to make sure that people that validate that it is a process that you go down, but at the end, it may not be the right appropriate situation for a child, depending on whether the criteria is in place or not.
Right. And there's things that we put in place, general practices we put in place, so you might not need them. You might, like a student with a broken arm or a broken leg, right? They, at the time, they're impaired. But they may just need to have things like, they need to leave class a little bit early. They need to have someone scribe for them. Those are things that you don't need a 504 necessarily
Right, just
for.
accommodations you do just because it's the right
general
thing to do.
accommodations, right. Best
Right.
practices for students. Students staring out the window looking at the squirrel. You might need to cue them to task, but they don't need a 504 for that.
And that's where open conversation can solve
Yes,
80% of the problems.
exactly.
Right, thanks.
Brandy?
So I have a son who is on a 504. He has a nut allergy.
Yes.
And I think one thing that I've learned in this process of 504s, because I was new to it, is that it is a work in progress.
Yes.
And I think one thing that's really important for parents to know and understand first and foremost is that what is today might not be what is down the road, and that each school works very well to transition your child from one building to another. So I just, in this whole conversation surrounding 504s, I know we're focused right now on the high school, but it is really important to mention that all of the buildings really do want to make sure that the plan that was set forth in the beginning of the year as you're transitioning into a new building that next year, they work really well with the parent, the student, as well as all staff that's involved to make sure that the 504 is up to date, as well as any additional accommodations that might need to be made or no longer are necessary. So it is a consistently evolving process that I truly appreciate. So thank you for all that you do, and thank you to all of the 504 coordinators, because you guys are amazing.
Very good points, absolutely. And that's why we meet with the transition. It's a key to move up from the 8th grade to 9th grade, the 6th grade to whatever it is, to the next school, for those reasons. Because some things may be different at the new school, or they've grown in lots of different ways. They might not need all the same accommodations, but it's individualized plan, and you have to look at it to see what's best for the student.
Excellent. Are there any other questions or comments from the board? Thank you for coming. And thank you. We're hoping you're enjoying 5 days a week at Merrimack High School. Not keeping it too interesting, but interesting enough.
Sure. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. And we're on to item number 4. So we're keeping Principal Sharon Putney at the table for parking at Merrimack High School. So Sharon, thank you for coming and addressing this, and welcome. And I believe you're bringing to the table Rich Sampieri and Peter Bergeron, who are assistant principals with you. And welcome, Pete and Rich.
Actually going to have Rich start things off.
Well, thank you for having us to talk about this topic. I put together a few notes, a little bit of a historical perspective. The oldest student parent handbook that I could find was from 0203, and so I'm going to read you something that was in there. Excuse me. Student parking stickers will be sold to seniors and then to juniors as spaces are available. A lottery system will be used when necessary. So it's been around for a little bit of time. This was sort of interesting. As noted, for those who violate the parking privileges, first you get a ticket with a fine, then you get a boot with a fine, and then other violations might end up with towing or suspension and a loss of parking privileges. We don't boot anymore. I just want to point that out. After reaching a peak enrollment of around 1688 a few years back, enrollments have declined. At that time, you had over 400 students in every class, which meant that most of the parking spots were going to seniors, with a few left over for juniors. Then as enrollments declined, more and more juniors got spots available to be part of that lottery, to the point where it declined that we were able to allow a few sophomores to get permits back in 16-17 and 17-18. But then things started to grow. In 18-19, there were no spaces for sophomores. We had 164 seniors apply last year, with juniors taking the remainder of the spots through the lottery system. This year, we had over 200 seniors ask for permits. Again, the remainder going to juniors. So in the initial application pool, there were 165 juniors who wanted a permit. We pulled initially 120. About 20 of them didn't meet the criteria, whether they didn't have a license at that point or didn't have a car. So an additional 32 names were selected, 20 for the juniors from that pool, as well as the 12 spots that we had saved for our vocational students. That was done because our vocational students need to get on buses before the regular buses arrive to school, and the buses are going off to the other schools. So they need to be able to get to school on time to catch those buses. And after those 20 were pulled, some again didn't meet the criteria, so we pulled the remaining numbers until all spots have been filled, 332. And as the original pool of 165, there are 24 remaining that did not get spots. The lottery is operated pretty much what has it been for a number of years. Seniors are able to buy their permits starting on the first day that IDs are given in the summer. This year that was August 19th. And then they have 3 weeks until September 9th to buy their permits. That afternoon, a junior lottery is pulled, and those juniors have had this year at least until September 20th to get their permits. And then we started ticketing on the 23rd, which I will note is about a week later than normal, but we wanted to make sure that we gave enough time to fill those permits. Even with that extra time, there were a number of juniors who could not get their permits, as I mentioned before. So a second lottery was drawn until all the spots have been filled, 332. This process has been highlighted in a number of ways. There's a summer letter that's sent to families that went out, I think, August 2nd. It is published on the school website. Parking information is also included in the parent-student handbook. We did something new this year. We sent a letter out to all the juniors who owed more than $50, whether it be books or IDs or parking fees, just to be proactive and say you're gonna need to settle that before you can buy your permit. Just wanted to give them a heads up so they had time to take that into account. Also new is I think we did a better job of, for transparency purposes, sending out parking updates through School Messenger to inform the community of the progress of that lottery. I think one of the things that has always come up over time is empty spots, and there could be any number of reasons why there are empty spots in our lots. Seniors and some juniors are given the privilege of arriving late or leaving early based on their credits and progress towards graduation, or in some cases, sometimes conditions that are like medical conditions that we might want to help them with. Absenteeism. On any given day, for discussion purposes, let's say there's 5% of our students out. So 5% of the 332 would be 17 spots. And that equates to the last little lot that's paved that's under our control, which is 16 spots. So that may, on any given day, be totally empty based on just students that are absent. And then some students don't have access to a car every day. Life comes at them. Their family might need it for some reason. They're sharing it with someone else. Mechanical issues, any number of reasons why someone doesn't drive to school on any given day, but they have a permit which they were entitled to purchase. So.
Go ahead.
Thank you. And Matt, one of the things that I know that the high school team knows, but you're on so many items tonight, might as well just, get your voice primed. Can you just speak about the cost of a permit and where that money goes?
Yeah, certainly. The cost of a permit currently is $50. Years ago, it was like $25. This is a long time ago. It was $25. The cost of that it's booked as an estimated revenue on the general fund side, $20,000. That's where the permit fee goes in. And it's really to cover the cost of the parking lot attendant whose, salary with, FICA and et cetera is around $20,000. So it's meant to not have a tax impact, the cost of the parking lot attendant, who's there for enforcement and security reasons too. So that's where the money goes from the parking fees that are charged to the students.
Thank you. And also, the question has come up about the number of available parking spots versus the number of students who ideally would love to have them. And I would just take this opportunity to, and we'll talk about it actually in a few minutes when we talk about the capital improvement plan, but I think that it certainly bears mentioning that we're all in agreement that to have more parking at the high school would be beneficial. And one of the things that we are proposing on the capital improvement plan that Rich Hendricks from the Planning and Building Committee discussed a few weeks ago was a study to discuss a Merrimack High School SAU office campus redesign that would include, theoretically, the addition of more parking for students. And that obviously has impacts when it relates to future planning around everything from decisions we make now about what we pave and what we don't pave, or what we repair or don't repair, and lighting, because there is an effort there to tackle this at a fundamental redesign way as opposed to a Band-Aid problem. That said, I think that in speaking with the administration at the high school, and certainly Matt, we feel like there are probably some adjustments to the current process that could be entertained. And so those are that would be sort of the next step of this process, would be to talk about, given the existing conditions, what, if any, adjustments can be made. So my point is always at the district, we say that just because things were a certain way doesn't mean they always have to be that way in the future. What it requires is just some planning and some thoughtful intake of information, and then trying to do what we can with what we've got, always mindful that there is a larger plan afoot. So I think that we've been comfortable talking about that. Nothing that was always has to be.
Gotcha. And I think that you said at our last meeting about projections for student enrollments are going to go up 50 kids a year, and it doesn't mean they're all going to start in kindergarten. So we know that the supply and demand issue that comes with everything we do in this district will definitely have to be addressed in this evolving. I think we have kids that are more kids driving, I would probably say, based on the number of applications you're getting. But then you're also talking about more kids. And I think that's coming next. So, and they will also be driving. So I think that's going to create an interesting situation. Sounds like sooner than later, based on what NESDEC is giving us an initial idea of. So on that, I just wanted to kind of play that off. I do have a couple of questions. When Cinda realized her flight wasn't going to connect in time, she sent a couple of questions. I was hoping to go with those first. And that is, and it might be more budgetary, might be more, but about painting lines, because I believe they're getting kind of difficult, and it might be causing some space issues.
Well, we are, in the budget for next year, to give you a preview, putting some striping of that parking lot as it currently is laid out now in the budget, to have that taken care of, because it is in poor shape and it does need a refresh.
Excellent.
But as the superintendent stated, and I don't want to get too far into that, the overall campus redesign that we're proposing, as far as its inclusion in the capital improvement program, would take into account the reconfiguration of the current buildings, the potential central office, and the creation of more parking nearer the high school, which we don't have a plan right now because we want to hire somebody to do the plan for us and present to the board. So this is what's coming up. So I think I can say with somewhat certainty that the configuration of the high school parking as it exists now into the future will probably change drastically for the better. So that's what we're hoping anyway.
Excellent. And on that, I just have one question, because I'm thinking out loud because you brought it up, that I know that within our own layouts, we've actually, just from looking at the layout of the lot, Keach Nordstrom has in the past found ways to configure spaces to make them more efficient, to increase space. So is that something that could be done low cost with the existing footprint right now?
I'd have to
Can I
talk
just-
to, Mr.
Yeah.
Keeve, go ahead.
Before I want you to answer,
Yeah.
but I just want to clarify, by right now, do you mean potentially to be included in this budget?
Right, because if you're painting lines, can we paint lines the most efficient way to possibly add a few more spaces?
I see.
That's something that I would definitely bring that up to Steve.
He's a blood from a stone designer, so that's why I'm asking.
Well,
He's done.
He rung out some additional parking at Massacola Elementary
And
School.
Reeds before that, and
Yes,
absolutely.
and
So
Reeds before that.
we have success traction with them.
Yeah,
So I don't know if it's something, it's thinking out loud because,
Mhm.
Coming up now.
Mm-hmm.
What can we do
Well,
short term?
if we were going to stripe it and it wouldn't be a big change of how everything is, we could definitely look at that. I wouldn't assume that it would be a huge cost to do a striping plan off drawings that Steve probably already has in his office, so.
So just
Yeah.
thinking out loud, but if we can,
Mhm.
if we can squeeze a little blood from a stone, that, I think that would, every spot helps. I think
Mhm.
that's probably been what we figured out this year is
Yeah.
every spot helps. Another question from Cinda was, non-Merrimack High School lots owned by Merrimack School District, how are they being used? I can only assume the question evolves around, we have multiple campuses in proximity to Merrimack High School that have spots? How are they being used? Are there any maybe open spots? So I'm trying to figure out what that question might be, but that's where I'm taking it. So are there any, like Master Call Elementary, Upper Elementary, are there any spots, because of even the reconfiguration on one side or on the back side where the high school lot is, that there might be spots that could be procured? And I'm assuming that's her question, so bear with me.
I would not assume there are, the Master Call Upper Elementary School parking is primarily the church, Our Lady of Mercy. So it's their parking lot. We have signed an agreement with them to allow our staff to park there and visitors to park there, but not necessarily high school students to park there.
Okay.
Now, I know that if you are a member of that congregation and you are a high school student, people have asked if they could park there during the day. I'm not giving them a lot of publicity to kind of get that going, but it was because we had questioned that too, because we had seen high school students parking there and then walking up McElwain to the high school. So we questioned that because we were fearful of Our Lady of Mercy getting upset with us because of high school students parking in their parking lot. And upon having a conversation with them, we were told that the students who are parking there currently are allowed to by the church. So that's up to them.
Okay.
But it's not a
Master Call Elementary
wholesale
wouldn't
thing.
have any with the
MES
reconfiguration.
wouldn't have any front or back lots.
Okay.
And really, there is nothing else that currently exists. I know where the cars are located, but I couldn't mention that as a viable alternative.
Okay, and then her last question was, are sophomores parking in the lots right now? And that's probably for you guys.
Not with permits. We've given all the permits this year, the 332 to seniors, and then many of the juniors that applied in the lottery.
But not even all of them. So sophomores were not even considered for the lottery. It was all juniors and seniors.
We would look at
Juniors,
the
'cause seniors
existing
were done.
seniors and juniors,
Okay.
the remaining juniors next.
So those were her questions. So I'll open it up to the right, and I might have some at the end that are my own. So Andy and I think Naomi. I'm on my computer, so sorry.
So I have a comment first and then a question. And because I heard some of the parental input. First, I know how much it costs to tow kids out of the dirt parking lot. I know how much it costs to wash 5 cars in either direction because the kid sits and spins all day. I was an advocate when my kids were students to close off the dirt lot because it was risky. There's no guarantee the school provides that students should be able to park there, frankly, and they do so at their own risk. And yes, it's owned by the school district. The district owns the land all the way up O'Gara. It's all district owned. But it's not constructed to be a parking lot. And kids use it. Kids park their trucks up on top of the ridge that's up there. It's been going as long as I remember. But that being said, we're not going to cone it off. I mean, we could decide to put a few dollars in to put some gravel on that lot to make it so it doesn't have mud holes. That's possible. But I think at the end of the day, what Matt alluded to in terms of the plan, so I'm the liaison to the Planning and Building Committee, and we're the ones that came up with the idea to relook at the whole campus because parking's an issue, the buildings are an issue. And many people say, oh, we're spending money. Well, we've got to do something because there's a lot of issues there. We've got to put sidewalks on O'Gara, partially with the town center committee and other things. So evaluating the whole O'Gara Drive as part of the complex is part of what we need to make sure happens. Because maybe there's parking in places in the result when we close buildings down that would solve this problem much easier than putting them further down O'Gara Drive. That's part of the plan. But it doesn't address anything near term. It doesn't address anything for next week or in the winter or when AAA will be lining the trucks because they got to pull the kids out of the mud. It's not going to solve it near term. So the question I had, sort of the long way to get there, is given the fact that, and Matt, I'm going to compare this to the guaranteed maximum rate that we go through. We know that when we plan for health care, we know we're given a guaranteed maximum rate, but we always hope it comes in less. But we plan for the worst case. In the case of your parking, you've given away 332, is that the number? Tickets, because that's the number of kids. If everybody showed up on the same day, that somebody would be in the lot. given the observations that you've done, is there an opportunity to roll the dice a little bit and say, we know that there's always X number of spots. We're not going to give them all away, but maybe we'll choose half, knowing that on any given day there's a certain number that are less. Has there been consideration for that approach?
That's been considered, I would say, every year that I've been working. However, I think the reason we have not gone in that direction, that doesn't mean that we still can't reconsider it, is those years we get the phone calls from the people who have bought a permit and there is no spot for their son or daughter.
Have you
We've had those conversations every year.
but have you, I'm just curious now, for assuming that there's nobody illegally parking, and by the way, I've had a car booted too, so just, we won't go there.
Not by me.
I know, and those stickers don't come off very easy on the windows. Has there ever been a scenario in the last few years where truly the lots have been completely filled with valid parking? Stickered parking all the way down to the final little
We
lot?
both have gone out for different reasons and have seen the spots full at different times. There have been times when they're not. Clearly, we get those phone calls
Right.
as well. But there have been,
But there are
times.
cases where
Yes.
the whole lot is full with valid parkers
yeah.
as part of it. See, the thing is that when you try to look at the scenario, even you buy a permit, you're guaranteed a spot, period. And if there are scenarios and days where that's true, then you can't give away extra permits because then you won't be able to fulfill, you get the angry calls.
And some of those days may have been days when there are students there without valid permits, but we don't know who they are. And thus, we can't call them out of class to move their cars for those who have permits.
Okay.
Can I just-
Okay, I'm just,
So-
just playing what if
It's a-
games
it's
here.
all- So if I could just build on that, so what I want to emphasize, what Rich just said is that that has been considered, and generally speaking, that hasn't been done. But you also heard him say that that doesn't mean that it couldn't be reconsidered and done. I think the point to make, if such a decision were made or such a reconsideration were made, that the scenario that Rich describes is also true. And so that this is a case that until we get to the point where parking is just not an issue, that would come theoretically with a campus redesign that would include more parking, there's going to be inevitably, as there is in many towns, there's going to be a give and take. There's going to be a gain here and a potential loss here. So the question really has to do with, what are the relative merits and what's the likelihood of one scenario over another. And so I think the point that we want to make tonight is that we're open to dialogue and conversation, but just need the community to know that with any decision like that, there's, with this, there comes this. And so, but we're not closed off to any possibility by any stretch.
Naomi, you had your hand up?
Well, now I have something new to mention along the way too. I know we're not deciding this moment, and there are certainly many, many opportunities and things I haven't thought of, but I would not be a fan for the overbooking the flight way of doing this. I mean, we can't really give students a waiver to miss school that day the way that an airline can if there's not a space on the plane. So I'd be concerned with that. At the same time, I'm curious about something completely different. We have a parking attendant. Now, when you say parking attendant, I think of somebody in a cute little hat who's going around, letting people in. I haven't seen that happening. I'm glad. That would be not a good use of the job. So what does this person do? When are they there, and what is their job?
We actually have two folks who help us with this. One that patrols in the morning. They're not gated areas, so it couldn't be I let you in, I don't let you in sort of situation. They go out over the course of the morning checking for valid permits. And then they come in and also before they start, they will find out from the secretary who helps us with the parking a list of students who might have driven a different vehicle on any given day so they don't get ticketed. And hopefully if they did, they get it waived. So there would be a list on any given day, say, of 10 cars where students had to bring a different car because theirs broke or mom took the other one or whatever it might be. and try not to ticket them if they're on the list. And if a student isn't on the list or doesn't make the list, and we find out that they have a valid permit, we waive the ticket as well. And then we have a person that goes out in the afternoon as well, checking for those students that may have moved their car or come late that didn't have a permit per se as well.
Andy, and I think you're about, okay.
Just,
Yeah?
if I could just comment on continue what Rich said in regards to the 2 parking lot attendants. I think they're constantly educating the students, in regards to making sure they don't park in the end zone so they don't get a ticket. But also if a student has to go out and get a book or something in their car, we use our two-way radios to contact them. And then they'll go out with them. That happens most of the time. Or Rich, Sharon, or myself will walk out with the student. That has happened before as well.
So, what was I going to ask? Oh, so when you do ticket cars that aren't legally parked there, do you retain a list of repeat offenders so that, and do you take action? What sort of action do you take if a repeat offender? Because I've known kids a long time ago that would just keep driving cars and parking in different places to hope they don't get seen and stuff like that.
Well, in the middle of last week, when we finally determined who a frequent violator was, we called home and informed them that we have just discovered that your son or daughter was in violation and has, say, 5 tickets. We also encourage them to say, please encourage your son or daughter to find an alternate place. We can't suggest where you go because it's not our right to say go park in the church or go park at Frank's. We never do that. We just say you can't park on school grounds. And that if you are a habitual offender, you might end up with detentions or suspensions and loss of social privileges. And you will need to take care of those accounts before you go to, say, the prom.
And do you use the police to look up the license to figure out who those parents are for the vehicles?
It has been done on a few occasions that they've helped out to determine like the habitual offenders in that sense. Sometimes it's a faculty member who the student has parked in the faculty lot and has noticed Joey getting out of a certain car, and we're able to address it quicker, sooner than later.
Okay.
So I did have a couple of questions myself. First is about safety. I know that when the parents came to the microphone earlier, they talked about safety concerns. Can you tell me what safety concerns you've been made aware of with the way the non-permitted parking spots have created on the property?
I have talked to a few parents who had concerns about students going to, especially that dirt lot, if they had parked there during the school day. And I actually worked with a parent to run some ideas past, and we did come up with some protocols that now all of the administrative assistants have in the office for when a student is going to go. The process for if they are especially going to that dirt lot that they might have parked in, that they have an escort go with them, and that the student is allowed to bring their phone with them if they go to that lot, because normally we don't let students take their phones in their backpacks with them. So we are doing more escorting of students to those areas for safety purposes.
Okay. And then you mentioned tickets, and I understand, and correct me if I'm wrong, that a ticket is $50, so the kid with 5 tickets would be, that's a car payment. Am I getting it wrong?
No, that would be correct math.
Okay, and with that, what is the value of charging someone more than they would get ticketed in Manchester unless it's a handicap spot?
It was set as a deterrent, doesn't always become a deterrent. That's why we try to find out who it is as soon as possible to make a parent aware that their son or daughter is starting to rack up some fines.
So, and is there any way, especially if there's a financial hardship, because again, parents
Yeah.
and kids, they're not telling the parents they're getting ticketed every day.
Right. And one of the things we've done instead of collecting money, we've often offered community service hours, so a student can work with a food pantry, a church, animal shelter, any sort of area that would be a sign of documentation from an organization, and we equate time with the money, and so they're giving to the community and not paying the fines.
Okay, and finally, that car payment we just talked about, where's that money going? Yeah, the fines.
Yeah, the fines come back to, the permits and the fines come back to the general fund.
And I feel like I'm grilling you. So you're on stand or something. God, I'm sorry. But I guess the final question is, then we're talking about resources, and we're talking about need, and we're talking about maintenance, and we're talking about lines, and we're talking about studies. And I'm looking at these $50 tickets, and could we, and it might be a question for us. So you could help us answer. It'd be great. But why would we put it to a general fund when we could put it to a fund that would be used for pavement? Because I remember we had a paving capital reserve fund that we could use. Again, we're talking about this redesign that we could use to improve the conditions in which these kids are parking anyway. So there might be a warrant article. There might be I'm kind of picking a little bit. I'm thinking out loud. I don't think out loud. I normally try to think ahead of this, but
Usually in order to put money into a capital reserve fund or take money out of a capital reserve fund, whereas the school board is not agents to expend, both ways you need a warrant article unless it's set up as a revolving fund, an expendable trust, kind of like what we did with the forest. When we did the timber clearing
Right.
years ago,
Logs to lumber.
we
Yep.
set up a revolving fund, expendable trust for the care and maintenance of the forest and the flora and the fauna and whatnot at the middle school and other locations when we did timber clearing. And so money can go into that if there was a donation or whatever, or a fees or something like that, it could go into that. But we don't have a mechanism to accept it and hold on to it for multi-years into a capital reserve account.
so, but this revolving fund could do the same
Yeah,
job.
absolutely.
The logs to lumber type fund, but
Yeah.
but
But
tickets
we
to
needed-
parking.
Yeah,
type
we need,
fund.
we need a vote to create, so.
Okay, but that gives us something to think about come
Yeah.
spring when we vote on things. So, but again, if we're going to spend the money to deter a behavior, maybe we want to improve the conditions to make the behavior less likely to happen. So I think we do that with a lot of things. So maybe we could possibly consider it for this. So again, thinking out loud. So thank you for all kind of playing along. But again, I can't give you an answer tonight on how the world will be better. But I think the more we talk about it, the more ideas that can come up to make a long-term solution. So I appreciate the time that you took bringing us the information and then. But did I ever get the answer? How much do we usually get a year in fines?
Usually around, I get a check for like 20,000 plus.
Holy cannoli.
Oh, no, fines? Oh.
Yes.
No, that's everything. That's fees and fines.
Oh,
Fees and fines,
Good thing this
parking
chair has 5
permits
wheels.
and fines
Woo.
together.
So, but
If I could just say, can you say that one more time so that everybody
Yes.
knows?
fines alone, about how much do we collect
Oh,
in fines?
fines,
you know?
it's not broken out for me as far as the money. It's fees and fines. It comes over one check, end of the year, 20 grand, approximately that amount.
And that all gets covered to the attendance? 'Cause it sounds like the 20,000 covers the attendance. Am I getting it wrong?
The attendant.
Yep.
Yeah.
that's-
Johanna?
believe
I don't know
his name is, oh, well, go ahead.
So we have 2 parking lot attendants, Dave Duncan and Mark Boardman.
Thank you.
So,
Andy?
so being the pencil and paper whiz that I am, 332 permits times $50 piece is 16,600, which would extrapolate about $3,400 in fines a year. If your number's correct, Mr. Chevin.
My number is my $20,000 check. I can see it right in front of my eyes right now.
So you get about
so-
$3,500 on average a year in
But-
fines.
But the cost of the 2 attendants adds up to that 20,000?
Yeah.
So we don't really have a net incremental at this point. Not that we're encouraging a net incremental. So, and Johanna, you had a question or comment?
I was wondering what the school's general policy on like the dirt lot is, like if there were accidents or like disputes that were to happen there, like how would they handle it? or would they handle it?
Well, anyone that gets in an accident wherever they are, we hope for their safety first, and we encourage them to report it to the police to make sure that they're covered, whether it's a hit and run or if there is a known person. And obviously, they attend to any injuries that might happen in an accident. We don't have a policy per se because we don't encourage students to park there or to not park there because we have no say over that area.
I just have to make clear, it's not open dialogue during a meeting. Unfortunately, we can't take a lot from the gallery, but we appreciate your support of being here.
Well, the truth is, it's school property. However, it's not a
Managed lot.
It's not an
Managed-
authorized managed
It's
lot,
not an
yeah.
authorized place to park, and students do it at their own risk. That's the problem. I mean, is there school liability because it's a school property? Yes, but if a student gets in an accident or their car gets stuck in the mud, it's out of the school can pay to do them out because they park there at their own risk, essentially, at that. I think, would that be accurate statement?
We have gone out there, and I would say also, the school has a battery starter. So we've walked out to start kids' cars. We've done that since I've been here, whether it was SRO Michael Murphy, now it's SRO Detective Hart, Rich Zampieri, or myself. But there have been, we've had to go out on occasion and, work with students who have been out in the dirt parking lot because of the way they park. So that has certainly happened over my time, and I'm sure Rich's time too, and the time that Sharon was, a teacher, and the time she's a principal will continue to be one.
And my only comment is, having been experienced out there with a fender bender and getting stuck, it's between you and the other person and the police, essentially, at that point in time. And it's up to you. If your car gets stuck, you pay to have somebody tow it out. It is what it is, essentially.
Naomi.
And it sounds like it's tricky in that regard, and that, it's tempting to say, well, just close it off. If it's a problem, just close it off, and that would not help the parking situation. And so there's this strange zone in between. One can forbid it and exacerbate an issue or give space, which then people can say, well, why don't you cover that lot as you do the other lots, even though it's not a lot? So it's a really interesting conundrum, that space, isn't it? Rhetorical question.
Yep, Mark.
Well, it's exactly, your point is exactly what we've been trying to say. There are solutions to things in the short term, and every solution presents, the potential for an equal problem created, which is all the more reason why, our goal is to try to present a plan in the relatively near future that comprehensively addresses this issue, so that we're not in the position of having to make kind of false choices that creates one benefit and another loss. So and part of our reason for being here tonight was so that we could talk about those sort of short-term things that we could do, mindful of consequences for them, and we're absolutely open to all of those things, but wanting to keep our eyes on the prize, which is a permanent fix. That's really the goal.
Excellent. Are there any other questions from the board? Comments from administration? It's a start. So thank you for coming. I think, as questions come from the public, we thank you for feeling comfortable reaching out to board members. And, the dialogue helps us to make a well-informed decision, when budgets come, know what's really important. So, having those other, touch points for data is always very valuable. So we thank you. We're on to item number 5, which is the memorandum of agreement regarding the Madeline Bennett sewer line. Oh, absolutely. Is it me or did I get it wrong? Did I jump over it?
Oh, no, I'm sorry, you're absolutely right.
Okay.
I'm looking at the wrong thing.
So there you go. Nope. So we're going with the memorandum of agreement regarding the Madeline Bennett sewer line. So as you probably recall at our last meeting, Town Council Chair Tom Koenig came to us asking why we hadn't voted to sign a document. And the reason we hadn't voted to sign a document is because we held a special meeting on August 26th, and in that special meeting, we had conditions that we needed to be met to feel comfortable with providing an easement to the town for the sewer line. Again, it's going to directly impact Merrimack Middle School, its operation. If a sewer line is not active, you cannot flush a toilet necessarily. All these things were in place, and then we also were introduced as a board to the fact that we only have a temporary certificate of occupancy, something that we as a district don't want to continue to operate under. So with all those conditions being, presented, we wanted to make sure that a document that we signed would meet our needs as a district, and that's what our August 26th meeting was designed to do. Since that August 26th meeting, the town attorney sent us documentation that did not address those concerns. So our attorney went back to them in the interim to basically try to get that language addressed that was in our motion. And at the end of the day, it was our attorney's recommendation to adjust one item in the motion, and we did that at our last meeting, that conceded that we would not take the sewer line until the end of the project, and at the end of the project that we would then be expecting a permanent certificate of occupancy. So that's all of what we did at our last meeting. So the town took a look at our attorney's last draft and provided us a memorandum of agreement that met those expectations. I think at the end of the day, we want to make sure that our district is operating at our need, and that we have influence into the construction project and how it will affect our sewage lines, our long-term goals of having a permanent certificate of occupancy, and then again, the final thing being Madeline Bennett Drive up to what we call the fishbowl, having that be the property of the town, because that's going to become part of a road that Old Blood Road in this new development will feed into. So with all of that being said, we wanted a document that would address all of those concerns. And this document does. At our last meeting, when we didn't vote to sign the document that the town provided us, we had a draft, and I read to town council chair Koenig what you would call the final results of it. And so upon successful completion of the Madeline Bennett Sewer Replacement Project, the school shall convey and transfer, and the town shall accept ownership and control of the Madeline Bennett Sewer. So we will no longer be in the business of owning a sewer line for that facility, which again, we built to their specs for their long-term growth. The school shall convey and transfer, and the town shall accept Madeline Bennett Lane up to the circle at the intersection with Old Blood Road as a Class 5 town-owned highway, and the town shall issue a full certificate of occupancy for the Merrimack Middle School. So at the end of the day, we don't want to stand in the way of this development. It was never our concern to do so. There's a great opportunity to have a new sewer line put in at the expense of the developer instead of the expense of the community. That's a win, and this document does all of that. It doesn't do it immediately the way we would have hoped, but it does provide us at the end of this project everything we had hoped for. And so with that, I'm hoping that we would have the opportunity to sign this tonight and send this over to the town council to ratify. So with that, I think we should probably formalize it. I will entertain a motion to sign the memorandum of agreement between the town and the school district regarding the Madeline Bennett sewer line.
So moved.
So moved, and is there a second? Seconded by Brandy. So, Andy?
I'm going to say this kindly. The original agenda we had for tonight's meeting didn't have this as an agenda item. I, as a member of the board, have not seen the updated document, even though I know it's only one thing has changed. While I will support this, I request wholeheartedly that when we have documents like this we're going to vote on, that we see the updated documents before we're asked at the table to vote. Because in talking with Finley Rothaus from the town council, they have seen every draft along the way. We as a board have not seen anything even to tonight when we're being asked to vote on it. So I am upset about this. I will support it because I think the intent is there, but we have to see what it is that we're agreeing to.
Okay. So with that, we'll put the motion to a vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, none. The motion carries 4-0-0. At the end of tonight's meeting, we'll take a moment to sign the manifest and the memorandum of agreement. On to item number 6, presentation of the capital improvement plan with Mark, Matt, and Tom Tussaud. Welcome.
Thank you. So, while Tom gets seated, I'm just going to sort of by way of context, say that we met with the Planning and Building Committee on October 28th and presented the capital improvement plan to them. And it was a good meeting, and it produced some adjustments from the Planning and Building Committee that Matt has outlined in a number of ways, which we'll talk about. So I think what we, unless there's any question from the board or desire to do it otherwise, if we could just go item by item and maybe ask Tom and Matt to speak about the decisions that were made there, and I'll certainly chime in at any point. But and then we can just kind of move along that way, so we are sure we have all the questions that you have, that we can answer them in that kind of order. So relative to the roofing, Matt?
Yeah, why don't we just go right down the page and just go across the years. So the first item is roofing. We've had this on the capital improvement program in the past. It's to replace sections of roof that we have that we feel have been reviewed and are potentially compromised. Last year, we had a roof in the budget, but in order to get to a position where we were under default, we took the roof out of the budget. So that same roof, MES and J. Muse, is appearing back now. And then Thornton's Ferry, and we just kind of go out to the outlying years of 2023, MES, J. Muse again, MES, J. Muse again, and then it just kind of picks up with the high school at the end for 25, 26. So there's a lot of roofing going on there, and it's just a plan that we've stuck to for quite a while. This year, Tom acquired the services of an independent, I don't know, what would you call him, Tom? An independent roofing consultant. So you recall last year we were talking, you had a visit from, I think Garland came forward, Scott Livermore from Garland. And so we had some discussions about sole sourcing the product. So this year we conferred with, Tom conferred with a number of school districts and found one near us that utilizes this service for an independent roofing consultant to come and look at what we have proposed and to see if it's valid or needed. You all know Tom walks all the roofs twice a year. Twice a year, Tom,
Yes.
still? Still?
Or more.
Or more?
Or more.
Twice or more every single year. So we hired this gentleman, and he pretty much agreed with what we have on the page here. So this was what was presented to the Planning and Building Committee, and this is what we have before you tonight. So if you have any roofing questions, Tom is your guy. Andy has a question.
Andy?
So, first of all, the essentially the roofing progression is the same as it was last year, except you've moved it out by one budgeting year. Is that accurate?
Yes, it is. And the reason why is we felt there was room enough that we could move everything out to try to even the cost to everyone. So
Okay.
we felt that we're no longer, are we at a point where we're acting proactive, not reactive anymore.
Mhm.
So what that did for us is enable us to just ripple it out to try to even out the price, so we're not doing 2 roofs in 1 year.
Are there any ticking time bombs that you can see that we as a board need to be aware of?
Well, roofs do change year to year, and
I don't want you to use a crystal ball, but is there
No,
anything that's closer to the edge, right?
I'm gonna say at this point in time, Thornton's Ferry roof that was out is probably closer than it was, but it makes sense because we'll push it out a year. I think we're gonna be okay. At this point in time, I don't see anything that's blowing up in our face, if that's what you
Okay,
mean.
that's
Sorry
fine.
about that,
I
but-
mean, we've been down the road where
Yeah.
buckets are out and things like that. The other question I had, just really quick, is that there's a roofing project that popped in the middle of these, and it shows up in 24, 25 with a MES JMUs of 477,000, that if I look in previous years, wasn't there. Is that a break apart?
I
'Cause-
think that might have been a mislabeled, because I think that's a high school project 477. I believe that's J&I of the high school, so there might be some mislabeling in that I
Well,
didn't pick
the
up
reason,
on.
let me, so if I look at the longer term one, there's one more roofing project that goes beyond this view, and that's for $100,000 or $1,100,000 that I don't know what it's for. And my only question is that, is there another roof that popped into the list that you've been sharing for years, or is it just things moved around? Because the numbers right up until that year are all the same to the dollar from what you've been sharing, so.
Yeah, we're right. Let's see.
I'm looking at last year's CIP on my
Yep.
computer over here, and 23-24 I see 477,090 for MES and JMUs.
So-
That's what it's
So
labeled.
what I'm looking at, by the way, is the CIP and bonded debt schedule that you have, that's your
Yep,
second document.
yep.
I don't see, at least in the version I've got, a 477 in
No.
there, so we'll just need to reconcile that to be sure.
Yeah, we'll reconcile.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions on roofing?
That's all.
Other than whether there's going, like, when will we be at the end of the roofing? Will it be the 25, 26, or will there be more to come?
I think we'll be out a few years. At that time, it's actually hard to tell because we have more clarification as we move forward, but I see a couple more roofs after the end of the term of this SIP.
Gotcha. And again, so it's more about, because I think that a lot of what we were doing had the 35-year warranty, so we're still well within that with all the projects we've done. So these are all the ones that don't have that 35-year warranty on them yet.
That's correct. Some of these sections have a 15-year warranty, some have 20, some have 25. It's kind of a mixed bag.
Okay. And I haven't been on the board that long, so it's all way before my time I'm here.
Yes.
Fantastic. And, but there's still more to come after 25, 26 that would be in that bailiwick, so.
Yes.
Great, thank you. So that's all. Any other questions on roofing? On to master plan study redesign.
Yeah, this is a new item this year. We did have paving and a sidewalk on O'Gara Drive. And the sidewalk on paving and especially the sidewalk on O'Gara, is something that the town center committee has been waiting for a number of years to complete the loop. So that sidewalk would start from the tennis court, not the tennis courts because they're not there anymore, from the skate park, right where O'Gara begins, all the way up and connect to the sidewalk where the official parking areas are. So in essence, that sidewalk with a curb would cut off any parking in the dirt area.
Just that'll stop them getting stuck, right?
Well, it'd be a 6-inch high granite curb, and, it wouldn't be advisable to try and go over that. However, that's not in the CIP. That's going to be studied as part of the master plan campus redesign. So that's one of the things that's going to take a look at. So there will still be some sort of walkway from the beginning of O'Gara up around to make the loop, because that is part of the master plan of the town. It is part of the town center committee, and I think it is important because a lot of people walk that area. But in order to do that, we have to look holistically at the entire campus and to look at where additional parking could be placed. And if we wanted to place parking in that dirt area, that would be something that would have to be engineered in, so we'd have to throw a curb cut in there in order to allow entrance and exits to that additional parking if it were to be there where the dirt lots are right now. However, this is generally a plan to look at the entire campus of the high school and JMU's and central office and everything, and it's a study, and I think the Planning and Building Committee approved of that, and they passed it on to happen at around 2021. So, are there any questions on that for
You're
us?
taking my job. Are there
I'm
any
sorry?
questions on that? I'll go with Naomi, then Andy.
Comment rather than a question. In some ways, it's both frustrating and amusing to delay that sidewalk again. I don't want to even know how long they've been asking for that sidewalk.
It's been a while.
But it's far better than building one that's exactly at counter purposes to what we're going to need next. Yeah.
It's
If
kind
I
of
could just
ironic,
say-
isn't it? Yeah.
That is exactly the point. That is exactly the point, that we cannot be in the business of fixing one problem and then resolving to see 3 other problems and then saying, oh, if only we'd thought of that. Now, it's not a good use of taxpayer money. It's not a good use of resources. It's just not smart. So I appreciate your mentioning that. That is exactly the thing that we need to be about, is taking a helicopter view of this entire area and trying to forecast what would be best for us in the long term. By us, I don't just mean the school district either, but what would be best for us in the long term, and then make planful steps to achieve that. So appreciate your mentioning that.
Andy?
So, when Rich Hendricks was talking about this a few weeks back, the plan that he was showing sort of stopped at the end of the Massacola football field beyond there. It didn't really talk about looking beyond up O'Gare all the way up to where Babusk Lake is. Is the plan to do that full look at O'Gare all the way down and the complex, and is the $100,000 sufficient to do that?
Well, right now we believe so. I've talked to a few companies that are in that kind of line of work, as far as traffic study and whatnot, and it should be sufficient in order to get the kind of information that we would be looking for and the board would be looking for. When we go to, if this winds up in the budget, or a warrant article, or the money is appropriated in some fashion, what we would like to do, because it's kind of a difficult thing to bid out because you don't really know the scope, is to invite a few firms to come in front of the board and have you ask them questions. Because in addition to cost, you want to be comfortable with the people you're going to work with in order to look at this plan and to ride it all the way to fruition. So it's a strategy that we're kind of thinking about right now in anticipation of getting a firm to come and do this. But we feel the $100,000 is enough to take care of the plan.
Does that planning also include the structure of the SAU building that might be proposed, or is that going to be based off of an existing plan?
It would include the positioning of the SAU office, taking into account other buildings perhaps removed, and utilizing the only footprint that we have as far as the size of the building.
So do we have to spend, are we going to leverage any money we have for the design that we've been talking about with the SAU building, or is that going to be an additional expense that we incur to plan the building itself? Because we've seen many designs over the years of what the SAU sped building could look like.
Yeah, basically we have the schematic that was done by Marinase, and we've had that put down. And then they did a rendition of using the footprint of Brentwood too. So there's a freestanding, it's on its own lot version, and then there's the Brentwood version. But the board, I believe, is falling away from the Brentwood footprint and looking in another direction. So we do have a plan that gives a rough estimate of what the perimeter of the building would look like. And that would have to be something that would be firmed up once that would be incorporated.
And Mark, did you have something to add?
Yeah, so, I just want to say that all the existing plans that have been developed and put forth for the SAU SPED Consolidated Office were absent any larger. And so we certainly would be kind of foolish to ignore all of those plans. I mean, we've already provided information about desired, optimal size and need and so on and so forth. So it would be not really smart to not use those, but I would just remind everybody that those were in the context of, just one building and no other conversations. And so this isn't, so the reason I say that is because taking into account those other things, it might impact things like placement. I mean, it might be that this engineer would say that, that the placement of the new SAU office is not ideal where it's been proposed to be before. And so all of that needs to be included in this new study.
Well, my point wasn't so much, because I agree that they may decide to put it someplace we never even thought of, and that's part of what you're paying for the flow and for the plan. My point is that the building that they would put there would be something based on a current design that we have for a standalone. That's what I mean. We're not going to redesign the way the building is.
I'm sorry. No. That's been decided.
Right.
And yes, right.
Okay.
But yeah, there could be a few minor things, but nothing.
Right.
We're going to utilize what we already have because it's a good design.
Right.
Yeah, no,
Any way you look at it.
I wanted to be sure we weren't going to reinvest yet again.
Who knows? It could wind up where the dirt parking lots are.
Yeah, whatever. And the final question is, how long is this, do you anticipate, once the study starts, until we get a plan that we could then, as a district, move forward with? Do you think it'll take the entire fiscal year to do that?
No, I think the goal would be in 2021 to have something and have a cost associated with it that, certain decisions would have to be made, how much you want to go and how do you want to spread this out. Do you want to make it a phase 1, phase 2 type thing? Or do you want to take it all at once and do a bond issue? Considering the cost of money is pretty cheap right now, it all depends how you want to finance it. But I think it would be appropriate for us to have something pretty firm and some options to give you a decision point around the time that we're looking at finalizing budget, warrant articles especially.
So like a little bit later, in a year from now, maybe a little bit later, maybe December-ish.
December-ish, yeah.
Yes, but, if you look down, SEU construction campus redesign in 21 and 22 and 22, 23, we have to have a number to you.
No. Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm trying to plan it because the next line says when you're going to put budget items in potentially as placeholders. So my question was, how long do you think we as a board will have before we see the plan that we're paying $100,000 for, and then be able to work? Because if we don't get anything till December or January, it's going to be really tight to do anything formal for the ballot in April. You see what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I mean, we have to work all the scenarios.
We
out,
have to
right?
talk about how the flow of information would go back and forth, because we want to have multiple meetings in front of the school board in order to have the school board informed on what they're looking at and have the public informed also. So I think it would be kind of a phased-in sort of approach that by the end of it, you probably would have be leaning in one direction or another. So I don't think it's going to be, the mid-December, here's 2 options. It's the first you've seen of it, so pick one. It's by then you'll have experience with the development of it because you'll be part of it, and you'll know what color the kitchen countertops are and the wallpaper is and everything like that. So you've already picked out everything that goes into it. And so now it's a matter of just making decisions and how do you want to phase it. You want to do phase 1, phase 2, you want to do it all at once, or do you want to wait until 22, 23, you want to do it in 21, 22? We're doing this plan so you'll have the information to make that decision for the vote that would take place on April of 2022. Or if you wanted to go
Well, that's,
this year, you could do it then,
that's fine.
Okay. Do you have a question, Mark?
Well, I just, I feel like maybe we're not totally understanding your question. I want to. So I'm being dense, but I don't want to be dense. So
Okay, I'll make it clear.
Yeah.
The Planning and Building Committee's intent is to do a plan and put something on the ballot in April of 2021 for at least some initial thing.
Correct.
My concern is, will we have enough data in the planning cycle a year from now to be fully prepared to do a well-thought-out, well-marketed plan to do something by April 2021? And it seems like it will be snug to be able to do that.
It would be, yeah, it would be.
Okay, I just want to set expectations, because your next line has TBDs next to
Yeah.
the 2 fiscal years beyond the planning year. And what I'm hearing and what I'm feeling is it's going to be a bit of a stretch for the 21, 22, given the timelines. That's the reason I asked the question in the first place. Timeline.
Yes, well, we're working on the 2021, so we appropriate the money so we appropriate the money, we have the plan starting July 1st, 2020. We work, let's see, August, September, October, November, December. So it would give you the option of looking at putting something on the ballot for the 21-22 budget year, the following year.
So that's so that scenario that Matt just described is what we're hoping to be able to do, because we recognize that it's important to, there's a lot of reason to move this along. Everybody has said for years that, but if the question is, will the board be in a position to get information so late as not to be able to do a thorough job? Clearly, if that were the case, we would just wish to postpone it. The whole point of doing a plan is to have a plan and have a careful, thoughtful plan that's developed by a professional and then presented to the board so that it can have all the time it needs to act on it. So my operating assumption is that the people that we're going to contract to do this will understand our timeline and will work very hard to accomplish its goals so that the board can have time to do its work. It's hard to predict. There are lots of variables that could make their work postponed, that would therefore make it later to get to you. But I would say at this point, if we're going to invest this kind of money and time, that it would be not a good idea to force an issue in April of 2021 if we're just not ready for it. So this is predicated on a best-case scenario, but no, I think it would be contrary to everything that we've tried to do to rush something at this point just for the purposes of getting it into the voters in 2021. If it's not ready, it's not ready. If we've learned anything, it's that we have to do this right and planfully, and so I don't know. That doesn't give you but I don't think that we can give you a concrete answer.
We don't know the answer, but we have a timeline, and that's what we need to work with next.
Right.
We're gonna,
Yeah.
The CIP has money to budget to do a plan. We know that about a year from now, give or take, we should have a plan that we can then decide what the next steps are.
That's correct.
Period.
That's the
Correct.
goal.
So we need to be flexible in terms of the next TBDs and the next line, because we really don't know the answer yet.
Absolutely.
Okay.
That's
Yeah.
right.
And like the superintendent said, we've been working at this for 15, 16 years now. So a couple more years to do the plan and to have everybody, plus it gives everybody enough information on it to get buy-in for the need and everything like that. So it does two things. It allows the board to have enough time to do a proper job, and it gives the community enough time to really absorb what we're trying to do. And, everybody knows that well, let's go back to the middle school. 3 votes, 3 years. First year, we lost it by 33 votes. Second year, we lost it by 3 votes. Third year, it passed, with flying colors. But it took 3 years of putting it up for a vote to get people acclimated to the thought and the idea of a new middle school. That's a lot of work behind the scenes and a lot of work publicly that was done too, that really hasn't been done with the central office, if I may say so.
And I think I would add to that, you brought up an interesting topic, because the one thing, and this is my second favorite document to follow things, because my favorite document has the bonded debt included in it. So I went to an old copy and wrote it down. So this coming fiscal year, the 2021 is the last year of the Merrimack High School edition bond. So we're retiring a bond this year, and we have one more bond left of bonded debt, and that will retire in 23-24. So, that in mind, we will have only one bond to manage out for another couple of years. So I think that helps us too, is to look at the tax impact of whatever we do off of this study, and when is the best opportunity to lessen any direct tax impact to that. So, and of course, we'll look at things operationally too with, if we know something is going away, what are we going to invest in with facilities with it. So those kind of things. So it gives us a good roadmap. But this design will definitely help us get there. So are there any other questions or comments on the master plan study redesign? We are on to, which is kind of an interesting one, SAU construction campus redesign. And that just has TBDs on it.
Yeah, this was placed in 21-22 and 22-23 because of, the plan and the timeline and everything like that we just kind of spoke about.
Correct.
So this would be the actual implementation of the plan, which will more than likely include a new central office SAU building at a location to be determined, at a value to be determined, and it would include other items like a reconfigured front entrance to the high school, not the building specifically, but the way and the grounds that you get there, reconfigured parking in the parking lots, gaining more spaces as 2 buildings may or may not be demolished, or 3 buildings may or may not be demolished, giving us the ability to add more parking close to the high school where it's needed, and the abandonment of the dirt lots. That would be something to provide enough parking so we don't need that area. And so this is basically the implementation of wherever the plan takes us to be. So that's why it's just there with 2 big TBDs.
Okay, are there any questions on TBDs? Seeing none, on to bleacher upgrade.
Okay. Well, this is something that we had on the CIP previously. The bleacher, you see the blue arrow? We had the bleachers in the Smith Gym in 21-22, and it was moved to 2021 by the school district planning and building committee. So we just wanted to show that action of where we actually had it and where they wound up placing it. So that would be, we had it in 21-22, they moved it to the budget year coming up that we're going to be working on right now. So we've talked about these bleachers both in the Smith Gym. They're tall, they're wooden, they're still structurally fine. Why don't you talk about that, Tom? You know more about bleachers than I do.
They're certainly doing what they were designed for. They don't have any handicap access to them. There's no handrails going up. So they're not current as far as ADA acceptable, but as designed, they're functioning as they are supposed to. You would say the bleachers are old, and they do need replaced. You could certainly see the wear in them, but they certainly function right now safe, and there's no imminent danger.
Andy?
Even though I wasn't at a planning building meeting when this was discussed, what I was told is the reason they moved it is to level the bleachers across 2 years rather than doing both at one. Is that an accurate statement?
Yes, and I don't, and the question came up at that time, was there any benefit to do both sets of bleachers in the same year? And we do not feel there is. So splitting them up would be fine.
Any other questions on bleachers? I had one, and that is, there's not an economic impact, but if there were an interest in doing both of those bleachers, because Smith Gym and the APR are both JMUs, would there be an operational impact? I know that when we ordered the bleachers for the high school visitor bleachers at the football game, it took longer than expected, obviously. They didn't go in, by the first day of the next year, the way a lot of our constructions projects do. Does this have the same level of custom construction requirements, or is it a little easier, and are they more kit-like?
I would say the high school project was more of an emergency project that we were trying to get done in the quickest amount of time that we could. This would be obviously planned and would be able to complete it during the summertime.
Were you talking about the
I was
outside
talking about the outdoor
bleachers?
bleachers, not the indoor
Oh, the
bleachers.
outdoor-
Indoor
Yeah,
bleachers,
you
I
remember-
that
Yeah, the
emergency.
outdoor bleachers took longer than
That
we
was a
thought.
challenge.
Yes, it was.
Because of a couple of things going on, the economy being pretty good, the lead time on the steel, just getting the steel. We could have gotten the pre-rusted steel, and that would have been, they sell pre-rust, that's what most of your bridges and stuff are made out of. It's pre-rusted, and you just put it up there, and it's kind of an in-stock item, and, but we wanted steel that was anodized, coated, whatever it is.
And I think one of the big issues, we were working on a design to make sure that it was designed well and to meet our needs. Then obviously the problem with, ended up with their mill taking longer to making it than initially thought. Plus, with concrete, with the early freeze, we didn't get a lot of our concrete work done that we
Right.
thought earlier, so it pushed us off into the fall. Pushed us into the spring. So.
Yeah, then we had to relocate a water line that we didn't know was there. So that was interesting, so, yeah.
So, but with all that, my
This is
question.
more cookie cutter.
Yeah,
so.
my question is, if we did JMU's, the APR and the Smith Gym bleachers in the same year, and the reason, the motivation for this is because if you add the CIP projects plus debt, the two together for 2021 will be $2,321,136, and the next year will be $2,511,107. So if we move the 60,000 down,
Yeah, you want
they
these
would
two
come
together.
closer to 2.4 million each, just to level it out a bit. So that was really the method to my madness on that
Yeah.
question.
I
Could it
think-
be done, and does it make sense to do it?
Could it be done? The problem that we run into is the APR at Mastacola Elementary School. We're having some problems with calf wheels, putting dents and stuff into the finish. So we wanted to take another year, try to work those problems out, work with the manufacturers of the tables and stuff, and make sure we don't end up putting a new floor down and still have the problem that we're having now. So that extra time just gave us some time to look at it and make sure we're clear on it before we move forward.
So non-CIP circumstances are driving this decision. Totally
Yeah.
fair. Okay, that was the genesis of my question. Are there any other questions other than on bleachers? Andy? About bleachers, on the bleachers line of our CIP.
So, just so I'm clear, you're talking about replacing the Smith Gym bleachers, which we know where those are, and the JMU's bleachers and the APR, which is where everybody sits and where we go to vote.
Yes.
In the town room where we do that. There are cafeteria tables in there that roll across that floor?
In the, where we vote, yes, every day.
Where are they at?
Normally they're stacked up in back of the room.
Oh, okay.
They're rolled up. They fold and they just push up.
And that statement is tied to the next item in the item, which talks about replacing the floor in that. Because
Correct.
you're worried about it rolling on the floor.
Correct.
That's, okay. So, that's your segue into
is
your
that my
next line
segue?
item.
Okay, so I guess you have a lead-in for
Okay.
gym floor replacement for the CIP?
Well, this is something when Mark, Tom, and I were getting together and we were talking about it. That is an all-purpose room. And all the other all-purpose rooms we have, there's VCT, which is vinyl composition tile. It's your regular industrial tile that you see in every school and around here, at least. Lasts for a very long time. It's in the hallways. It's in all over the place. So we were thinking that we'd like to at least float the idea out, if we can't solve the issue with the tables, because it is a cafeteria too. It's a cafetorium, or whatever you want to smash the words up to be. And so perhaps we'd look at just kind of putting it out there is doing it in VCT as opposed to a wood floor. Now, we don't have any tournaments there. We don't have any Merrimack sports practice there, but we do have MYA.
Correct.
So they'd be somebody to consult with about what their use is.
Andy?
So I know that the APRs in the elementary schools are used by MYA as well for games, right? That's a correct statement. And they have VCT tile today. So what you're talking about is taking floors that have been there for like 1,000 years, give or take, and turning them into tile for that big room that we're in, which works great if you're going to vote or things like that. But the question is, can it be used for athletic functions for MYA and things like that? Which means you'd have to find out the experience that they have in the smaller schools and smaller buildings to see whether it's a problem to put it in the bigger gym, because it used to be the gym in the district. That's
Right.
where everybody played basketball games, which is why it has wood floors today. So you're talking about converting something that's never been that way before to a new style, and you're looking at the overall impacts that it would have to things that use it.
Yeah,
Is that correct?
absolutely.
Okay.
And as a matter of fact, that very issue that you raise, it's pretty big. I mean, because it would be a pretty significant change for that school. And so that's why we didn't feel comfortable for this purpose to make a decision. We wanted to say what the options are, VCT or wood, and then allow an opportunity for really some discussion about it at the board level and even, who knows beyond. But we recognize it's not a small decision given the history of that place and that space, and so, we recognize it's a big deal.
Yeah, you're right about the voting and everything like that. If you're voting at Bedford High School in the gym, there's a floor covering. The one year that we did voting at the high school in Merrimack and we used the gym, there was a floor covering, correct, Tom?
Yes.
Yeah. But we use the JMU's APR for voting all the time, and there's never any floor covering there.
We've covered it before, yes.
You've covered the
Yes.
floor? Oh, okay. I usually walk in and I don't see it, but we have deliberative session there, and there's no floor covering, and the cafeteria tables that are in the back, that's a daily thing that they just grind on the wood floor, which is held up amazingly well, given I don't even know how old this thing is, Tom.
Original.
Original? Okay. Well. Andy could tell us the exact
Older than
age.
me.
Older than you? Okay. So it's, been there for quite some time. So we have that, and then we have Merrimack High School gym off in 23-24, and Tom can talk about that. I think it can maintain one more sanding or not?
No.
No?
What we're looking at is also at the high school, original flooring, 1977, I believe. And what happens is when a gym floor is installed, it's normally sanded, and they poly it down. Every year, we bring somebody back. We have people screen the floor, put a new coat of finish on the floor. But depending on use, every 10 to 20 years, that floor needs to be sanded, sometimes more often. And what happens on a wooden floor, you get roughly 4 to 5 sandings out of it, depending on how deep they need to go during each sanding. And at the high school and also at Mastacola Upper Elementary School, APR, the last time we sanded, they started seeing tops of nails. That means that you're done. So from now on, to do any improvement to those schools, we need to replace the floor. And that's why we put in the budget to take a look at it, to replace the gym floors, because they have outlasted their life.
Are there any questions on that? Seeing none. 1977 was something. Long time ago. On to boilers.
Okay, we replaced boilers at Mastercola Elementary School over the summer, basically. That was a $400,000 job, but there's redundancy there, and they're brand-new boilers, and if one section fails, you know, the other sections can carry on. And so we're looking at, you know, kind of continuing that, but spreading them out into the latter part of 24, 25, and 25, 26. 4 units at the high school, and then 2 units at the upper elementary school. Tom, I don't know if you want to say anything about the boilers.
The boilers, there's 3 units at the high school in the original old section of the school, the 77 edition. One of those boilers in the new section, that would be in the 2000 edition. All of them should be replaced probably at the same time that we're figuring. So that's what we're looking at the high school. And at Muse, also, we're looking at replacing boilers. And at the same time, and it's in our mind now, just so you know, is we're probably going to have to do some pump upgrades too at the time. And that's probably not in here, but that's something we're thinking about also. So a little bit of thought for future. That's what we have with that.
Yep.
Are there any questions on boilers? Seeing none. Onward to window replacement.
We've had this in the CIP. We're just kind of splitting it up into 2 different years. The windows here are, as you're driving by the bus loop on the side of the building that's closest to Daniel Webster Highway and the road going down. No?
It's closest to my building.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The back.
Oh, see, I'm thinking Daniel Webster. Yeah, DW Highway. The same thing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Not the,
Not the turnpike. That's
Not
the
the
Everett.
turnpike,
That's
yes.
the Everett
The old Route
Turnpike.
Correct. I just thought.
Old
thought
Route
about
3,
that.
not new Route 3.
Okay, we're going to get into the nomenclature of the old Route 3 as opposed to, I was trying to be contemporary, you know, and be.
So you give directions in New England.
Yeah.
Where the gas station used to be, you take a left.
You used to
There you
take
go.
a lot, okay. So, on that side of the building, I'm not going to say it again. So it's on the outside. I've been around 26 windows, Tom, 25, 26?
26 windows. is
26
what we're
windows.
looking for right
And
now.
then on the inside of that same area, where the courtyard is, the same amount of windows. You're probably thinking that's a lot of money for windows, but all those windows, in the caulking of the windows, there's asbestos. So there has to be an abatement done.
We're certainly anticipating there's asbestos because we've ran into the problems before. Although it's not known, so maybe we don't. Maybe if there's no asbestos there, which would be kind of pie in the sky dream, that we might be able to do all the windows that we wanted, both inside and outside in 1 year. Most likely that won't happen. The windows that we're looking to replace are bigger than the ones that we did at Thornton's and Reed's. We're also looking to another dynamic that we're replacing second floor windows, so the scaffolding and stuff goes up. So, and it's hard right now to tie anybody down with a price as far as it's that far in the future. And certainly, all these items are gonna go out for bid, and that's when we're gonna end up knowing really the true cost of it. But at this point, it's too early to put it out for bid, so we just took kind of a guess what we think that it's going to be, and hopefully, we're thinking we'll guess something that we know we're gonna be able to do, and that's why we're putting it on 26 windows. We don't wanna guess 52, and then all of a sudden we come back and we're not as happy as we could be.
And I just wanted, because asbestos was used, and I don't want any listener out there to think that that there is an open asbestos problem in the windows, right? So
That's
Just
correct.
explain that, just.
All the asbestos is not friable, meaning we don't even know at this time that we have asbestos in our caulking. We do not know. It's never been tested, never been confirmed, but the way the law is written, if you're gonna do construction, you need to test it and make sure to protect the occupants of the building, the students, the staff. So what we would do prior to starting any projects, which we do all the time, is having a company come in and do testing for us, and they would come back with results, and then we'd make a plan after that. So, right now, in the school district, we went through a long period where we removed asbestos floor tiles and mastic, which, as far as we know right now, all accessible asbestos floor tiles and mastic has been removed from the school district. When we did do this summer, Reed's Ferry and Thornton's Ferry windows, we did do our testing, what we should do, and it did come up positive. So we know that we do have some asbestos in the caulking. It's not friable, so it's safe. What we do to ensure the safety is twice a year we do a visual inspection. That would be myself going around, taking a look, logging it down. We'd also call a company in that does our asbestos reporting, and they come in and they do an assessment. Also, every 3 years, they come in and do an assessment from an outside organization to making sure we're intact and up to standards. So those are the steps that we take and make sure we take this very serious. And right now, we do not have any friable or any dangerous materials in the school that's not being addressed.
And because Tom and I have been dealing with asbestos for a number of years to finally kind of see it to its logical end as far as the known type, we have a tendency to use jargon, and Tom used the word friable. And if we're talking to the people at home, what friable means is it's in a particle form that can become airborne. It's broken. It's something that you could inhale, and that's when asbestos becomes dangerous. So none of the asbestos that we have or we suspect is in a form that it can become airborne and you can breathe it in. It's all contained.
Correct.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. You done with windows?
I think we're done with windows.
Because I just wanted to make sure I don't have a note next to the 316.5 at 2324. That
Yep.
is for which windows?
No. Which windows do we have on there in the high school?
The windows?
In
Yeah.
23, 24, Tom?
Yeah.
The 316.5.
23, 24. Those would be the windows at the high school.
Yeah, but which ones? Because I thought we just covered them in 2021 and 21-22. So there's other windows we haven't covered yet?
Yes, those are only the windows in the E section of this school. These are sections, back section of the high school is what we're looking at out there.
And the E section is,
Is the section closest to the maintenance building.
Okay, so I'm just going to go back. I might have you run through it again. So the 2021 has 26 windows, MHS outside. That's on the side of the building where the buses go along the back of the building to go toward the track where they drop kids off.
Correct.
Okay, so, and that goes along the superintendent's office and that side of the building. 21-22 is the MHS courtyard, and that is the area where the fishbowl is?
Yes.
Okay, so the
But-
front of the building were the two main entrances where the community would normally come in?
No.
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 No. That is also an E section. We're gonna do E section, everything on the outside of the building, as you'd be standing on the outside building, looking at the building. The ones on the courtyard side, if you're in the courtyard inside of the school
Okay.
itself, looking at E section, the other side of,
So if you're walking down,
Yep.
so if you're walking down the hallway
Right.
at the high school,
Those little garden squares.
right, so in 21, 22, it would be the windows facing the courtyard in that same hallway.
Yep.
So this
Okay.
year, it would be the windows facing the maintenance building. And
Okay.
the next year, it would be the windows on the other side of that hallway facing the courtyard.
Okay, and then we take gear off, and then we get into 316.5, and that is, which ones?
That would be windows in the back of the school, but facing the track.
Facing the truck.
Facing the track,
Okay.
okay.
And then what about the ones in the, as now I call it the fishbowl, which, so I'm just making some notes, basically where the principal's office is and the nurse's office is, that takes you toward the gym and the little theater, those two main entrances. What
Those
about those
windows-
windows along the front of the building?
Yeah, that'd be the front of the building.
Mhm.
So those were replaced in 2000.
They were replaced already. The ones in F section facing the parking lot,
Yes,
yes, those have been replaced already.
in 2000, and so that has no worry about asbestos,
No,
that kind of thing?
That's correct.
And
That was
then-
part of the high school, the three-story high school addition
Okay.
renovation, was to replace those windows in the front of the building.
Okay, and
And
what's,
so those were done in 2001.
okay, so at 2001, what's the useful life of those windows? What's the,
Windows are hard to, some go 20, some goes, it's like roofs. Some are going to take you 20, 30, 35 years, and obviously, we're a school district of additions, so depending on the year that they put it up, what they spec.
okay, so, but still, it's gonna take us past the CIP period, which
Correct.
ends in
Mhm.
25, 26.
Yeah.
Okay. Andy?
Just as a statement of color, the E section was the second wing put on the high school that was put in the early 70s. And
Yes.
those are the windows that were there when I was there, which was
Yeah.
over 40 years ago. So
Right.
essentially when, as we added things onto the building, the windows, especially in the inside, became in the courtyard versus on the outside the way that they used to be when it was an L.
Right.
Right.
Mhm.
Okay. And the question I had is are those windows, besides probably being not efficient, are they still functional, meaning they open and close, or are we having issues with the locks and the frames that structurally we need to start addressing them? I mean, they've been there for a whole long time.
I think some of them don't lock, right, Tom?
We do have some that don't lock
We have to lock them manually.
manually with
Stick.
Bars and
stick,
sticks.
Majority of them work fine. I would definitely say the worst section is the E section that we're talking about, that we're addressing sooner than later.
Are there any other questions about windows? Okay, and we're on to MHS Turf Field.
Okay, you see the blue arrow there again. We did not have this on the capital improvement plan, meaning administration, and the school district planning and building committee put it in there and put it in 22-23. So last year it was a petition warrant article. It was approved by the board, but it wasn't sponsored by the board. It was by the people. So we didn't feel it proper to include it and assume the board wanted to go that route again. So we left it off purposely, and the Planning and Building Committee inserted it into the capital improvement program for us.
Okay, are there any questions about the turf field? And we'll start with Brandy.
One question that I have is relative to the timing of the placement. It's in 22-23. And for those that are watching, can we just have an understanding as to why it was placed in 22-23 and not sooner or later?
So as Matt said, for all the reasons that Matt said, it was not originally on the CIP. So we had a conversation about that, and one of the reasons was because if you look at 22-23, that theoretically would be, if the board chose to have a phase-in of the campus redesign, that would be in that same year. And so that's, we've trying to balance things, and that would be a pretty high price tag for a SIP for that year. Their idea, I think, was merely to say that this is a value, and it is, and that it should be placed on the SIP as a reflection of our commitment to this project. So, and something, I think we agree with, it would be my so they just put it 22-23, more or less, just chose a year, so it would be there. as I said to them, it wouldn't be my recommendation to keep it in that year. I might recommend having it be in an out year, but this is why we have a dialogue. But in any event, that's how that came to be. But the biggest issue, from my perspective, was trying to balance large ticket items in any given year.
And I will tell you, because I did my little exercise here, and by having the $1.2 million added to 22-23, it puts the CIP total for that year at $2,239,938. Add the second to last payment for the Merrimack Middle School of $821,500. It puts the CIPs plus bonded debt at $3,061,488. So it gives you a $500,000 jump, which of course is going to affect the tax rate. So that's something as we're playing as we're evaluating this, we want to consider it. Naomi?
So I'm on board with the value of the field as a whole. I'm curious about the change in its status, and that when we were talking about it before, there was this marvelous push towards fundraising. There was the idea of it being funded in part or in such by the community, and it now seems to have just kind of landed in the district budget. And I was wondering if there could be a little more conversation about that.
Well, as I say, it was not originally in what the district was prepared to present to the board tonight. And largely because of what you said, because, and Matt said it very, very well, this is something that we all take very, very seriously, and a group of very committed parents were involved in wanting to see that forward, and there were lots and lots of conversations about funding sources, and those are still valid conversations. And so I think kind of like with the campus redesign and the parking, we're trying to be planful about it so that when, and I would say not when and if and when this turf field happens, it will happen, in my opinion, because it will have been, thoroughly discussed, thoroughly vetted, planned for, conversations about supports from the community and business and so on, like the parents were attempting to do last year. So that was a great start. So all of that's to say that for those reasons, it hadn't been our intention to have it on. I think the Planning and Building Committee rightly is reflecting a value and a need, and thought that perhaps if it never appeared on the CIP, that it would be sort of a tacit suggestion that maybe there was no value at all. So, point taken. It's just in that particular year, that was their suggestion, and wouldn't be something that I necessarily would agree with, but good dialogue.
Would it make more sense, and if it's simply a placeholder, I'm fine with that, but would it make more sense to represent the district's most likely expenditure as opposed to the whole cost? Because that is putting a huge little blip in that bottom total, which isn't representative of the ways that the intent was to fund it.
I would have to say that, I'll let you weigh in because it's probably off of that.
Yes.
Then please take my place.
So the turf field is obviously something that I am a huge fan of, and that's not a secret. I do see the value, and I do see the need for our children to have that experience. Long term, I think it is a great choice. I really would like to put together a plan for the turf field that makes sense from all points. And I'm not sure, I appreciate them adding it into the CIP. I'm not sure the correct path to take relative to a separate committee, something that says to the community, we are in support of this. However, we need community involvement. It needs to be a team effort. So as it was mentioned, the 1.2 million definitely changes the bottom number. I obviously am not a huge fan of that, but we need to find a way to build the bridge between community and the budget to see how we can fund it. And I'm not sure what the best path to do that is, but certainly would like to put some more thought to this rather than sticking it on the CIP in some random year. That, to me, doesn't send the right message, especially if somebody is going to look at that bottom number and say, this isn't going to work. Because then my fear would be that it sends the wrong message about, well, no, this is fully on the taxpayer, and this is fully going to hit at a, time when we don't want it to hit. So we need to kind of craft a better plan than sticking it in, is what I would say.
Could I?
Of course.
Okay, I don't want to interrupt you, so if you're going to say
No, you're fine.
something.
I just wanted to make
Okay.
that was well thought out. So I think she represented well.
Yes. As always. Anyway, I think the thing is, the capital improvement plan illustrates the date that you're planning on acquiring the asset and what the gross cost of the asset is. In this case, it's a turf field. It's not equal to an expenditure plan. Like when we had central office down here for 2.8 million, that showed up in 1 year, 2.8 million, but I think it was everybody's intent to bond that out so we wouldn't be spending 2.8 million. So even though it does show up here, that's the gross cost of the asset that would be added to the assets of the district, and not exactly necessarily what would be spent in any given year, depending upon how the board chose to either finance it or to fundraise for it. But it's just a statement. So even if we were doing a warrant article, it would start off with the gross cost of the field, and then it could say X amount to be raised by contributions in donations and pledges, and X amount by general taxation. So you'd break it out that way. So this 1.2 isn't saying this is what we're going to pay, and we're going to pay it all in 1 year. It's just saying this is when we're planning on doing the work in order to acquire the asset.
So is there a way of footnoting that on a CIP when you publish it?
Yeah,
I
this
think
is not a
that's-
spending plan. This
Right,
is
so that would be the compromise. Intent is to have, fundraising offset, portion of cost,
you could put a little star next to that.
something to that effect. But, I think we probably have to, as a board, on that note, set a goal of what that funding is. And Naomi?
Again, none of this are deal breaker type things, but I don't think that an average person or even a non-average person looking at this would take away the idea that it's added value to the district as opposed to, it's called an expenditure form. I mean, I understand the
Capital
logic
expenditure summary form, that's the
Right.
way it is, but you're spending money on capital.
I understand
And
what you're
it's just
saying.
not-
I'm
it's
just
not
saying
a
that
s-
this
a
form
spending plan.
posted without us to talk through it, I
Correct.
don't think that's, even with the footnote, I'm not sure that's the takeaway people will take.
I would agree, and I think that's precisely why, again, for the points that were made, this, there's value in this. And the way that I think we can demonstrate value is by being thoughtful and planful and having a good vetting, kind of like what's happening tonight, but even more. And however the board chooses to pursue is how we'll do it. But I would agree. I completely appreciate the thought of the Planning and Building Committee to support conceptually, and this was a way to do that. So I'm grateful. So it's not that. It's more about what have we learned about how things are actually going to happen, and the voter and the taxpayer, I think, as the board has always supported, deserve, a plan and thoughtfulness, and so for those reasons, to take it seriously, it would be maybe to do it a little differently than what's represented here. Yeah.
So, sorry, Shannon, okay.
No, I would just say that there's got to be some way, and I think that we as a board have overcome many obstacles to find that line between shock value and transparency.
Right.
So I think that we want the transparency that there's a turf field is the intent of the district, and that it will cost more than, was it $100,000? Because that's our benchmark for making a CIP plan. That's duplicate. So a CIP, a capital improvement plan. So, but how do you do so in a way that is properly outlined? And this document doesn't do it, never has, never will. But maybe it comes to the point of, as we approve it, there needs to be a PowerPoint about what these different things mean.
Mm-hmm.
And, how we consider it, what we look to be the cost to the taxpayers, and in some cases, maybe even the savings to the taxpayers, which, lighting retrofit, I think, will possibly quantify something to that end. But, so what, whether it be, you have to do it for safety reasons, you have to do it end of useful life. We're doing it because it's saving the district money in the way we operate things, or it's improving district operations. We have to do what capital improvements do, because again, at the end of the day, all of this stuff, I'm just looking at it, all of this stuff has a very difficult case to make the case for student outcomes. And that's really, the focus of what we do. This is a sidebar that is a necessary sidebar, but, it's where a lot of the money goes. There's a lot of money, $2 million a year is all capital improvements of our budget every year. And, it doesn't talk about student outcomes at all. Teachers do. Support staff do. Windows don't. But they are necessary to operate the district. So how do we balance that transparency, but, make it clear to the taxpayer kind of what our intentions are with each of these? So I think that there's a better way to do it. This document is what we need to do it, but it's not necessarily what the taxpayer needs to understand it.
For sure.
Agreed.
And
Agreed.
the only thing I'd like to add to that is that to those supporters of the turf field, if 1.2 million landed right now on our desk, could it happen sooner than 22, 23? It's possible. Could it happen after? It's possible. I think the key is that if somebody were to look at it, not only looking at the year that it is in, and as well as the dollar value, it can all change and it's flexible. And so I just want those that are supporters to understand that it is still something that is top of mind for us, but how we do it, we're going to get creative. And the year is not necessarily set in stone.
Gotcha. Any other thoughts on turf field? Andy?
And just to follow up on that, if you had a benefactor show up tomorrow that says, I want to put a turf field in, you would approach it that it was a gift to the district, that we would have a public hearing to accept the gift in order to expend that money to do that in this year. So, there's ways to make this happen. The only time where it shows up here in terms of a budget is if taxation is going to pay for it. So that's the key, is that if you're going to find a creative way to get it, you've got to stage it all so the money is available for us to receive in a year to be able to do something with it. And then we can have a hearing to do that. So that's the methodology to use.
But Powerball wouldn't hurt. So there's no other questions on turf field. We will go on to lighting retrofit.
Yeah, the next item we have is something that we've been kind of internally talking about between Tom and I and Mark and Marge previously. Looking at the last time we had a lighting retrofit was 12 years ago, I believe. 12, 13 years ago, where we changed out a lot of the fluorescent fixtures to newer, more energy efficient fixtures. And now LEDs are coming to the forefront. And so we would be looking at the first couple of buildings to try and phase this in, and we really have to do a site survey. But MES and the upper elementary school to do interior lighting, change it over to LEDs. we don't have a price tag on it, but we'll probably be getting one by November 18th or thereabouts is a good estimate to put in there to give you an idea of what the cost would be. And then from that, we can figure out what the payback would be over the number of years. The town of Merrimack is doing something similar, so we're planning on perhaps using the consultant they had in the future, or opening it up to more than one consultant to come in and kind of go forward with some sort of plan to look at the entire district and changing out to LEDs, because, you know, it's a labor-saving thing. Tom doesn't have to have his people changing out bulbs all the time, and it's an energy efficiency thing. And the lights, especially in the area outside buildings, are much brighter and more effective than the old ones we have. So, Tom, I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
One of the feelings we had about LEDs is what become very apparent to us if you look at the new parking lot we just did at Master Colop Elementary School, how much better they're lit now than they were. So one of the things that we would be looking at is to improve all of our schools' parking lot lighting, so we make ourselves safe and to function with less money to do it. So we're looking forward to doing the inside, but we're also looking to do out the exterior of all our buildings. And we feel there's a value there to do that, and that's why we're looking into it.
Are there questions on LEDs? So we're looking at the 18th to have better data, and then, so with that, I know we usually try to have a review one night and a CIP vote the next. So is it unrealistic then to have the CIP vote the first week in December? It would be then.
Could be, it could, I mean, I think it could be even sooner.
Yep.
It could be. It's the 18th. I don't know where. I don't have the calendar.
Sorry, it's
The
a
board
board
night?
night. I mean,
Right.
we'll have the,
But I mean, would you want us to make a determination on where to put it and how much to put into it that night if we haven't, if we're just getting the proposal at that point?
oh, I see. Yeah, I'm sorry. Right.
Yeah,
Sorry.
okay.
Thank you.
So with that, you know, we'll have to keep an open mind on whether we can move that forward on the CIP if we don't have that night to take on the
Until
data.
that night, right.
Right,
Yep,
so
sorry.
that's the only hesitation.
Mm-hmm.
But it's obviously gonna throw off one of these numbers. So that's just a thought.
Yep.
Okay. So are there any questions other than that on LED, on lighting retrofits? Because technically it's 2011 on our body clocks, because we just changed, so I'm doing my best, people. So on that note, I think we've reviewed all the areas of the CIP. At the next meeting, we will look to propose any changes based on what we heard tonight, and things like how bonded debt could affect the collective number, and how bonding of items can also affect the collective number. So, so we will go from there. Excellent. Andy?
I don't want to discuss this tonight, but I want to plant a seed that either in the CIP or in the budget message, one of the things we've talked about off and on is whether next year, to save $40,000, we want to spend $200,000 to tear down the Brentwood building before the plans are complete. So I'd like the board to take a position on that and make sure that if we need to budget money, we do it.
Okay. So on to item number 7, which is guaranteed maximum rate for 2020 and 2021. Thank you, Tom.
Okay.
Have a good night.
So every year, it was, mentioned previously in the board meeting, every year we get a guaranteed maximum rate for both health insurance and dental insurance by the New Hampshire Health Insurance Trust, where we buy our insurance. And that's a not to exceed figure. It's a figure we use for budgeting. And sometimes it'll come in at that maximum, sometimes it'll come in lower. Rarely does it come in lower, but it does indeed happen. So this year, the guaranteed maximum health insurance rate increase is 8.4%. Last year was a little bit over 13%. And then dental is 3.9. So 8.4 on the health and 3.9 on dental insurance. So that will be a piece that will be incorporated in the budget that you will be getting first part of December.
Excellent. Are there any questions on guaranteed maximum rates? Okay, on to item number 8, which is unfunded mandates and budget impact.
So if I could just
Of course.
jump before Matt talks about that, I just want to explain why we thought it was important to have that be discussed tonight. So, you know, as we've been having our meetings over the last couple of months, and always tried to have an eye towards items that at some point are going to be impactful to the budget, or items that would impact a community member's perception of how things go in our district and so on and so forth. So the board has asked for transparency and conversation, and we've tried to do that. One of the things that I think is a little known truth about the work that we do is that quite frequently there are things that our school district, because it's a highly regulated enterprise, and rightly so, we want to make sure that our students are safe and secure and are attended to by people who are properly credentialed and who you know, follow certain rules about how you engage with students and all of those things. So it's good that it is. But because it is, sometimes what happens is we are given a requirement to do something or to provide a service, and that is not accompanied by a financial support. And so it's important for the board and the community to get a sense of what that means, because it doesn't mean that if we don't have the money or haven't budgeted for it, that we get to not do it. We have to do it. But if there are folks who wonder, you know, why certain things cost the way they do, I think it's important for the community and the board to know sometimes things happen that do impact the bottom line. And so we thought that in the spirit of transparency, to help prepare the board and the community for the budget that we're going to give, that we just give you an experience of a couple of examples of how that actually plays out in real life. So,
Oh, thank you. So, you know, the unfunded mandates and budget impacts, there have been a few of those over the course of the years. A couple of the more recent ones, it was really a direct impact to the parents. The state of New Hampshire used to fund the driver ed program at around $500 a student. So they were paying perhaps $125 to have driver ed, and now they have to pay the full cost of the program because the state basically walked away from funding the program and left it on the backs of the parents, even though it's a requirement and it was touted by the state as being, you know, centrally important to producing safe drivers and everything like that. But they walked away from that. There's something else that's going on. There was a new law that was passed that's requiring us to put feminine hygiene products in every single bathroom of the high school, middle school, and perhaps even the upper elementary school. So that'll be something that'll be reflected in Tom's budget. I don't have a figure on that, but they have to be available for no cost. And so we have to change out all the machines that we currently have, put new ones in that won't be coin operated or anything like that, and just have a supply in order to stock these devices fully, you know, every evening, and to make sure they're stocked during the day. So that's going to be an added cost that we weren't planning on. There's also, you know, you talk about the increase in the state funding, the $700,000 differential between last year and this year coming up. But, you know, we also spoke about Medicaid money. You know, we would collect anywhere from $400,000 to $500,000 in Medicaid funds. Well, this year, we were advised by Department of Revenue Administration to put down as an estimate probably around $20,000, $30,000 for next year. So, because of the changes in the rules that you wouldn't think would drastically affect the Medicaid money that you collect, but DRA is thinking that it is, and DRA has advised districts to go this route in setting their estimated revenues. So even though we gained 700,000, and there was a ceremony here with the governor presenting a big check to the town and everything like that, with the Medicaid rules, probably 400,000, 500,000 goes away. So the net is only 200,000, which is on a budget of our size is not that impactful. So you had the increase of 700,000, then you had a loss in revenue of 400,000. The increase was very public. The decrease was kind of not. So we just wanted to bring that to your, knowledge, so you have an idea of what we're facing on a daily basis. Catastrophic aid has been something that's been going down. It's called, what's it called now, John? Special education aid. Special education aid, thank you. So that's been going down steadily over the years too. So that's for out-of-district placements that are over 3.5 times the state average. Those monies have been dwindling. So a lot of the aid that we have been getting has gone down. Like I said, this year we're getting $8.8 million in state aid, but around 12 years ago we got 10.2. So, things have not maintained themselves or gone up with the cost of running a school district. So that aid piece has gone away and has continued to go away. Building aid is something else. If we were building a superintendent's office 15 years ago, we would get 40% of the cost of that SAU back to us. When we built the middle school back in 2003, 2004, we received 30% of the principal payment every single year that we get building aid for. If we were to build the middle school now, we would get absolutely nothing. So it's those types of things that we deal with as far as the state pulling back on aid or producing unfunded mandates to us that put pressure on the local taxpayer and is beneficial to the state budget, but is not beneficial to the property taxpayer at the local level. So I just wanted to throw that out there and make a point and perhaps vent a little bit, and I appreciate your time, but that's kind of the state of where we're at with that.
Right, and I have been at the high school, and I will say that some of those machines that have the free have already been installed for feminine hygiene.
Mhm.
So it's happened already.
Yeah.
And we've already had to do some investment in that this year.
Yeah, because the law was right now.
Immediate,
Right.
correct. So,
And I just want to be clear, Matt was very, articulated in those things. This isn't about, it is what it is. I mean, we're not the only school district that had to do that. It's just that it's important for those making judgments about budgets or expenditures, understand some things that might not be commonly known, because they do impact what gets presented to, the taxpayer. And I just think it's fair to point out those things that for which we get support, and those things for which there's a regulation that we have to comply with, for which we don't. And somebody has to pay for it. And so that was the point.
okay. Are there any questions on unfunded mandates? You really are uplifting, Matt. So, we are on to item number 9, which is the second review of distribution display of information at schools policy with you, Mark.
So thank you. So at the last board meeting, Board Member Schoenfeld asked the question about whether in the policy as presented that night, whether the distinction between material that was, distinction between whether the material that's disseminated by schools, just that's kind of typical stuff, is required to be vetted by the SAU office, as opposed to more complicated distribution of materials, and wondered whether or not that was actually clear, those distinctions were clear in the policy. So I indicated that I'd seek clarification about that, and I did. And the attorney who helped craft this, I will just say, thought that that was actually a very good catch, and it was something that he was going to take back to other parties that he represents for similar clarification. So thank you from him. And in the policy that you see, the fix, so to speak, that he offered is highlighted in yellow. So if I could just read that for the purposes of the board and the public. So requests to display or distribute materials originating outside the Merrimack School District must be submitted to the SAU office, which will approve the request and forward the material to the applicable schools for display or distribution. Organizations wishing to distribute materials must supply a sufficient number of copies. So his response to the question that Board Member Schoenfeld raised was to insert that line that clarifies that something like, don't forget your sneakers tomorrow because it's field day, would not need to go by the superintendent's office first, but something originating from outside the Merrimack School District would. And so it's attempted to be addressed in that highlighted yellow portion.
Are there any questions or comments on the updated policy? So our next meeting would have the third reading of that policy, which is normally put on consent. So with that, we will have this policy on consent unless something material comes up. We can always take it off consent and re-vet it and choose to vote or put it on another agenda item. So if not, we are good to go for consent. Item number 10, I'm going to ask to table. It's the school board budget message. And I changed laptops and it was on my desktop and it's gone now. So I'll be rewriting it. So sorry, it was not a ton of, but I have to rewrite it. So apologies for that, but we will be tabling item number 10. And we're on to item number 11, which we're on the housekeeping portion of the show, which is the approval of the October 21st, 2019 minutes. And I'll entertain a motion. Andy, second. Brandy. And are there any edits to the minutes? I know, Cinda did not email me questions on the minutes, so we should be good there. So seeing none, we'll put the motion to vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye, opposed, none. The motion carries 4-0-0. Item number 12, other. Is there any correspondence to come before the board? At our last meeting, you mentioned that there was correspondence to come before the board that we all got. Thank you for forwarding me that. There was a typo in my email, so I did get it and responded with apologies for the delay. And that email that we all got has been addressed. So is there any other correspondence? Seeing none, comments from the board? Seeing none? Oh, yes, please. John, okay. Sometimes you have to get me to look to the left, sorry.
Just ongoing about Universal Design for Learning, UDL. I just wanted to inform the board that we are all 6 schools and our administrative team are going through a process called instructional rounds, which is an opportunity for us as teams to coach each other on the UDL framework and go into see us in action on running meetings and in the classroom and doing that and learning all about how to apply all the concepts of universal design with each other and learning. So we're finishing up this week and next with all 6 buildings since the start of the year have been gone through it in our administrative team. So more to come in December. I'm hoping to bring forward the upper elementary school and Marsha McGill and her team to talk about the efforts they've had at the upper elementary school. So thank you.
And further comments, Mark?
So I'd just like to read a statement. Everyone associated with education in this community, educators, administrators, custodians, food service personnel, bus drivers, contracted service providers, office staff, and yes, even coaches must be held to the very highest standards when it comes to the work they do with students in this district. This principle applies equally to all staff and volunteers. Students must always be our number one priority. When an investigation regarding the conduct of personnel is undertaken, it must be conducted in private. This point cannot be overstated. Whether the matter at hand involves one person or multiple people, the most important principle to be preserved in any personnel matter beyond fairness to all sides is the privacy rights of those involved. This is never more important than in matters involving students, who should never, under any circumstances, be subject to any kind of public speculation that questions the credibility of any claim they may make. Likewise, for any staff member who should not be subject to any kind of public speculation that either exaggerates or diminishes the facts of the matter under investigation. For these reasons, we have not, nor will we now, publicly discuss the specific circumstances which led to a change in the football coaching staff for the remainder of this season. The fact that this matter has become public is a function of those who have made it so, and the resulting discourse has only served to inflame an already challenging situation for all those involved. It is always easy to speculate, but such speculation usually leads to inaccurate or incorrect assumptions. Such is the case now. It would certainly be easier to share information publicly that would clarify the reason for certain actions and put to rest the harmful and hurtful speculation. But for the legitimate interest of those involved, it is right and fair not to. I close by reminding all parties that the interest of all students remains this school district's chief objective. Thank you.
Thank you. Item number 13, is there any new business to come before the board? Looking to the left this time? Okay, seeing none. Item number 14, committee reports. Are there any committee reports from the board? Andy?
Planning and Building met a week ago. I think it was a week ago, give or take, where they were presented the CIP. I wasn't there because they forgot to tell me about it. But I did get a debrief, so I shared what I could with the board tonight. And then also tonight was the CERES monthly Board of Directors meeting, where we actually had a presentation from our new program director, who actually attended the Southeastern Region special ed directors meeting that happened today. And Liz Kelleher, who's the new person at CERES, met with Heather Barker to make some connections. The goal of this person as part of CERES is to expand and look at the services that we provide to meet the needs of the school districts in the state. So I think there's a lot of synergies that we'll pick up from a CERES standpoint into the districts such as Merrimack to provide what we need that could have positive budget impacts down the road, we hope. So, and that's all I have.
Thank you. Are there any other committee reports? Seeing none, I have a couple this week, but nothing before tonight. Item number 15 is public comments on agenda items. Anyone that would like to speak, and we actually have someone tonight, so you're more than welcome to come to the mic, state your name and address for the record. And thank you for sticking around.
No problem. Thanks for having me. I did write some notes here. Barry Wandell again, 73 Bean Road. I came tonight for the parking issue, which I appreciate you guys putting it on as an agenda item. I was very happy to see that. But also the turf field. Now, I spent years as a MYA coach, and I saw a lot of money leaving our district to have turf fields available to us. It's very important for us to be competitive. It brings spirit to the whole town and all the teams to be able to say that they own a turf field. We've always been like the stepchild in that regard. And it does affect the community at large, I think. So I think that's it's very good. Fund me pages, are those viable input for the revenue stream? Because you don't want to laugh at that anymore. I think that actually brings some money in. So that was just a quick comment I'm making on that. I would like to see a turf field, although my kids, well, actually my daughter's still at the high school, so she'll be playing. The parking issue. I do want to amend some of my comments. I wasn't expecting to speak earlier. I didn't want to leave the impression that the high school people weren't very receptive. Ms. Putney and Mr. Zampieri, I met with them in 2 subsequent years for different reasons. The first was the safety issue that arose. The second time was just for transparency in what goes on with the whole lottery thing. It's kind of hard to believe that a totally fair lottery occurs, but that could be the case, and I don't want to malign that at all. However, I do appreciate hearing the long-term efforts that are going to be done with that. I know that, you know, as a citizen, I don't want to see other classes have to, you know, deal with some of the situations we have. Certainly safety from just having, you know, sidewalks in Merrimack in general, let alone near the high school, is very important to give those kids a way to get in there. I've seen some horrendous situations driving into some of the meetings that I've come to. I do appreciate the fact that Ms. Putney, again, was very receptive, very responsive with the safety issue especially. She took great concern in it. I want to make sure that's clear. Unfortunately, when you have situations that require complex procedures to be put in place, you're opening new holes. And I think that's one of the issues we have. There was a lot of unsureness about who owned that property. Actually, we were told the town was responsible for that and owned that property. I'm glad that Andy was able to clarify that. That was where I apologize for the comments during the, although it does feel like we're in a fishbowl when we can't comment directly. It does seem counterproductive, although I understand the reasoning, because some of us would sit here and blubber for quite a long time and extend the meeting unfairly. Okay, so, and I also, again, with the long term, with more students coming in, of course, that's going to be a bigger issue for you guys to handle, or people that take over for you. And I did like the idea of not having to stick with the old method of guaranteed slots. I think that's absurd. I made that point several times with them and couldn't get, you know, the balance to go my way in that respect. I did do a quick survey this afternoon, actually going out to see all the different high schools that are around. I didn't do every high school in the country, but it did seem that the general thing was it was a first come, first serve. You had to have a permit, and I know the colleges, you know, when I was going to college, you had to have the permit. But then, you know, whether or not you got a parking spot, well, get there early, you had one. If you didn't, you park in the street dealing with the police. And I think that's totally fair in this respect as well. Although the long-term plans would be a lot better to have a place that everybody could park. And in the short term, though, the safety issues, I think just having a better definition for the access to the dirt lot would help a lot. The kids are still using it. As it turns out, it is school ground. You know, being able to just set down some access, definition to access, like, you know, you can only have 2 rows of cars. You have to leave such and such a space open for people to get out if they have to go to work and that. I know that's what caused a lot of situations. I know my daughter was pulled out and sent out on her own to the dirt lot for somebody that was called in that they needed to have, you know, access to getting their car onto the road again. That was very alarming because nobody had to present themselves to anybody in the school, and that could have been anybody calling in, which is what caused the alarm on our part. Certainly, we have our perception of what could have happened, and they had their own. I know they're very busy, and I hate to be pushing more onto them to have to do, but, you know, again, this is a safety issue. I think it needs to be addressed. And I think that's it. If we could just have, you know, definitive, even if it's like you can't park in the dirt lot, okay. If that's set down for everybody, that's acceptable. I just think that something definitely needs to be done. That's all. Okay. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Rondo. And then we're on to item number 16, which will take a moment to sign the manifest. I will entertain a motion to adjourn. Made by Andy, seconded by Brandy. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, none. The motion carries 4-0-0. Thank you and good night.